The time being 6:30, I'll call this meeting of the Concord Finance Committee to order, and we'll start with a call of the roll.
Suresh Bhatia. Peggy Briggs.
Here.
Kathy Coppola. Here. Eric Dahlberg.
Here.
John Garofalo.
Here.
Pat Dyer.
Here.
Greg Muriello. Don Kupka. Here. Lindsay Liss.
Here.
Dee Ordner.
Here.
Carmen Reed.
Here.
Paul Rodriguez. Here. Kazi Zabruzaman.
Here.
Sri Kugel. Lois Wassel.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. What we're going to do tonight is meet in regular meeting format for the first 30 minutes to revisit Article 7, which is the town budget article. At 7, we're going to open the public hearing, our last of 3 public hearings on the annual town meeting warrant articles. We'll run through all of the articles. They're shown on the agenda I'm sharing on screen. Then close the public hearing and resume the regular meeting for purposes of deliberating and voting on the articles we hear tonight, including Article 7, which we're going to discuss further now. So without further ado, the CFO and the town manager are here to discuss Article 7. Anthony, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to address the Finance Committee before I turn it over to Kerry, because I had an opportunity to watch that meeting Thursday, and I want to apologize for the error that we had in our revenue projection, but I had hoped before I left the state have a conversation with Eric and Colin, and I did, but apparently I didn't get my message clear because the meeting got turned in a direction where if I was here, I don't think it would have got turned in that direction, because just to explain, so the error was in no way, deceitful in trying to do anything different, to the town. I like to think of this year that you've seen more information from me than you probably have seen in the past as far as transparency and sharing the spreadsheet. So I just want to make sure that everybody fully understands. There was no trickery done with that. And the impact really was no effect. I know you got into a discussion about, we're going to add it to the tax rate and tax the citizens more. No. The spreadsheet actually shows that we're at a surplus, not a deficit. So we're still at a surplus. We were just at a higher surplus, which meant that the excess levy capacity was at, say, 5.3 million, and then it shrunk down to 4.5. I don't know the exact number. So in no way, shape, or form is your taxes affected by that error. So I just want to make that clear so everybody fully understands, because I think if I was here, I could have explained that and showed it to you, and you probably would have saved 20 minutes and got out a little bit earlier. So, but thank you. Now I'm going to turn it over to Kerry, as she's going to go through the rest of the budget.
Thank you for that, Anthony. And I think we're all eager to move forward on this article and the others on the agenda.
Yeah, thank you, Carrie LaFleur, Town Manager. I just put 3 slides together. They were in your packet. I hope you've had a chance to look at them. Following your meeting last week, I took the opportunity to go back and look at the different forecasts that you have been presented with. And obviously, when you're developing a budget, there are, we start very early in the process here, and there are revisions that are made as better information is available. So I believe there are 9 versions of the forecast that have been developed over time. I think these 5 have been shared with you because these are the ones that I found in my files as well. So the first version 2, that would have been developed after your preliminary guideline. Version 3, I think, was right about the time of your final guideline, and the reason I say that is because I can see the adjustments that you made when you increased the guideline recommendation for the town and for CCRSD. And then version 7, which I know it's dated March 10, 2025, but this is reflective of your final guideline. And if you look at the revenue projection between version 3 and version 7, they're pretty close. So then where we are today, that last column that's not shaded, the TM control column, that's where I see we are right now. And there have been some minor revisions to expenditure, and in that top box, that is where it says Minuteman Media Network covering some of that. I don't know if that can be moved. That shows you how we got from the expenditures at final guideline of $144.2 million to where we are now, $145.2 million. And the adjustments on the expenditure side is, I wasn't seeing in version 7 that we were accounting for, that finance was accounting for the $1 million worth of CMS debt that would be paid for through the transfer from the stabilization fund. So it was just showing as netted, so the expense was down, but the revenue was down. Under Mass General Law, we have to appropriate that, and then we take the credit when we are filing for all of the paperwork that we have to file to get the tax rate certified. We take the credit there. So you have to appropriate the expense, and then you have to account for the revenue as well. And then I believe you had asked the CFO to include an estimate if the roads article passed and if the amenities building passed. So there is an increase in exempt debt of $144,000, and that is, that would be the cost to carry a short-term note if one was issued and needed. So that's an adjustment. And then there was an adjustment to the CCR SD debt assessment, and I think maybe that had to do with the change in the percentage split between the member communities. So those are the changes on the expense side. If I could go to the next slide, I wanted to talk through the revenue side. And maybe I should have paused if there were any questions on the expense side. Don, do you have a?
Yes, I do have a question. Thanks, Carrie, and thanks for this explanation. And I did today go back through the various versions and saw that when we began looking at the guidelines, the expense side was around 141 million, and it's grown to 145. But aside from that, you mentioned the reserve release, and my question for you is it proper to account that in this budget when it requires a separate vote at town meeting? That's first question. And secondly, if we do it this way, it creates an additional $1 million capacity of spending versus return to the taxpayers. And my understanding of that reserve was the intention was to reduce the impact of the middle school borrowing on the taxpayers. In this case, it's actually increasing the overall revenue that's available for the town to spend, and so are we actually achieving the objective?
Yeah.
Thanks.
So several questions there. I'll start with, you had first mentioned that at guidelines, you were looking at 141 million, and now it's 144, 145. I think the way that the forecast was presented, there's 141,000, and I don't have it up in front of me, but then like the OPEB contribution was below the line, and there were some other, I think maybe the pension, part of the pension assessment was below the line. So what we try to do here is, I guess I would call this a pro forma. This is all the spending for the general fund, and it does assume that town meeting is going to approve the transfer from the middle school stabilization fund. It does make that assumption. It does not increase spending. So the total exempt debt for fiscal 26 is like 11 million something. We show that we have, when we do our calculation, that we can raise that full 11 million but then we have to reduce it by any offset. So we're not going to raise that extra $1 million. We have to show it in all of our documentation, but we also show a reduction of $1 million. So in effect, the additional tax that we are levying is 10 million something, because it's the 11 minus the 1. Does that make sense? I'm using my hands a lot. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
I think, is it any different from release of free cash to reduce the tax, which, has been a practice in the past?
Well, I mean, they're different classes
Yeah.
of revenue. So in my opinion, it is different. And we do have to show, the Department of Revenue, when we go through the tax rate certification process, we have to show them that we have the legal authorization to raise that 11 million, but that we are offsetting it with $1 million.
Right.
And I'm happy to sit down and go through this offline too, if
That'd be
that would
great.
be helpful.
Yeah, that'd be great, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Were there other questions on the expenditure side? No, okay.
I have one question,
Oh,
Carrie.
sure.
The jump from version 7 to version 8, there are two noteworthy deltas. The first is the property tax itself going from 121.7 to 120 even. And then local receipts and other available funds going from 16.1 to 18.8.
Yes.
Can you, and I know we talked about this
Yeah.
at the time, can you refresh our memory? What drove those big swings?
Yeah, so if I could go to the next two slides will address the revenue, so if we could go to the next slide. And this is focusing on property tax, and Eric, I'll get to your question in a minute. So again, version 7, reflective of your final guideline, the impact to property taxes. We were looking at that time to raise 121.68 in property tax. And the impact to the existing base is an increase of 3.98%. And the way, for people who have been on the Finance Committee for a few years, you'll remember in years past, it was very important to lay out what was the impact to the existing base versus what was the burden to be bared by new growth and debt. So I've laid it out this way. And then in the updated, the final, what we're going to town meeting with, the impact right now to base is 3.99%. It is almost certain that will be reduced somewhat when new growth is certified. So right now we have new growth at $1 million. It's probably going to come in something higher than that. Not a lot, but I think by the time we certify the tax rate, we'll be pretty close to where you thought you were at when you did your final guideline, if not a little bit lower. And so then, if we could go to the next slide. The next slide is the detail. I apologize. This is not easy to read, so I'm going to just pull it up here. There are and I guess if we could focus on what's on the right-hand side, you can see the various issues in the versions. So the first, and I compared 7, 8 to 9, so you can see, unfortunately, in version 8, some things were corrected, but they weren't fully corrected, and that resulted in an overstatement of local receipts and other available funds, and consequently, a reduction in property tax. But there was an issue with how the projection for interest income was recorded, and then the transfers to the Light Fund and to PEG, which is our Minuteman Media Network Fund, were overstated. I'm not entirely sure how the nearly 1.49 million what is made up there. But to me, it looks like it's pretty close to what the transfer should be, and then the retirement assessment and the pilot. And the pilot we record, the light plant pilot we record as a separate receipt. It's not a chargeback. It's a receipt. And the retirement assessment, while the light fund pays that, it's paid directly. It doesn't come through the general fund, so the expense is not showing either. And then for PEG, I think it's the PEG budget, operating and capital, that was brought in as a revenue, and the PEG expense is it's a separate article. So again, it's not coming through the general fund. So then in version 8, there was an adjustment to interest income. There was the inclusion of the offset from the middle school, the assumption of the offset from the middle school stabilization fund, but there weren't adjustments yet made to the overstatement of the light fund, the PEG fund, or the pilot. Actually, the pilot in that version was understated. Then in version 9, all of the corrections were made, and again, the impact to property tax is nearly identical to what you saw at your final guideline. I'm happy to answer questions. I'm also happy to talk to anybody offline about this if it would be helpful. And again, I'm not sure, I think I said, yeah, I did say it. On the revenue side, we're capturing all of the activity that's coming through the general fund, and there are multiple warrant articles that impact the general fund. It's not just the town budget and the 2 school budgets.
Questions?
Yeah, so can you just clarify a little bit more about how many articles you will be presenting at town meeting?
Me personally?
If you're representing the town.
So right now, my plan is I'm presenting the budget, Article 7, and the capital article. And then we'll have to see a number of the town articles end up on the consent, right? Yeah. So we'll have to see, but those are the 2 articles that I am planning to present at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions and discussion on Article 7?
So these are a lot of tables and they're fairly small. The warrant says the sum of $62,630,000, Article 7. Where exactly are we winding up?
The town budget is that number.
Okay.
And I was thinking in the presentation of, putting something together so you could show all of the sources and uses. And I think that's probably something, given the amount of time that we have at town meeting to present, probably is best in the briefing book. And then you can see how this all ties together. But there's no change in the town budget guidelines or non-guidelines. It's as presented, it's as published in the warrant, and yeah, there's no change.
Okay. Well,
Just,
sorry for a dumb
other-
question.
sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, one other, Anthony explained to me this afternoon something which I know you had addressed previously that had escaped my memory, that the budget is not always presented as a zeroed, where expenses equal revenue. And so as I'm looking here at some of the previous versions, there could be a surplus or a deficit shown in the budget. And I think that was one source of confusion on our part, because while it looks like we're assuming taxes have to go up to make up the difference, it's actually that the surplus that's baked into this model is shrinking, which has the same effect, reducing the unused levy capacity, but it's a big question of where you begin your assumptions, I suppose.
Yeah. So we can't raise more revenue than
No.
we need, right?
Right.
And if you actually were to go back and look at version 8, not that anybody's going
Happen
to,
to
you
have
can
it.
see that the property tax number is actually showing as 121 million in that, and there's a surplus showing.
Yeah.
We can't do that.
Right.
Right, when we fill out all of the paperwork to set the tax rate, we list all of the non-property tax revenue first, right? And then the difference between the budgets that have been approved and the revenue, the non-property tax revenue, we have to raise in property tax revenue. When you do the budget, you look at it, you start the process from the other side. You say, how much property tax revenue are we willing to levy to support the budget? And then we back into the other revenues. And then we do the reverse when we set the tax rate. And they are supposed to meet,
Yeah,
right?
right.
But we can't, I think any time a surplus was showing in the forecast,
Yeah.
property tax should be reduced to, because we're not, you can't raise extra and then put it in a, in a reserve. You can't do that by default. You can do that actively through warrant articles, but you can't do it passively.
Thank you.
Colin?
Carrie, am I correct that the revenue side of this budget for fiscal year '26 doesn't include any revenues from the Concord 250 program?
It does not.
And when do you think you'll have the final numbers from that? Budget numbers, or the revenue and expenses?
Well, there's no revenue associated with 250. There were appropriations that were made. Those are expected to be fully expended, and we're working on all of the invoices now.
Okay, so you'll be doing a final report at some point?
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
yes. And I suppose if there's anything left over in any of the appropriations, then that would come back to town meeting to be attended to be released. Because there were separate warrant article appropriations, and those won't close out to fund balance without action from town meeting.
Carrie, thank you for the slides and the presentation. One of the reasons why I was concerned in the last meeting was the errors, which you walked through several of them today. You caught them and walked through them. How confident are you that this updated version, this last version, you've corrected all the errors?
I am very confident. I spent a lot of time going through this. I do not expect any changes to revenue from here to tax certification, other than I'm hopeful that new growth is going to go up somewhat. But I would expect this is what will be reflected on the tax rate recap.
Okay. If you were to discover an error or a discrepancy of some kind, a material discrepancy between now and town meeting, you would flag that for the Finance Committee?
Yes, I would.
Okay.
And again, I do not expect to find anything material or immaterial.
Okay. Other questions or discussion? I am cognizant of time. We have to open the public hearing at 7. That's the time it's posted, so we've got about 4 minutes left. Do folks feel that we're ready for a motion?
Motion to adjourn?
No. Motion to approve our...
That is a motion, but I'm thinking,
Move to recommend affirmative action on Article 7 as printed in the warrant.
Second.
Who seconded? Lois? Thank you.
That's a motion to recommend affirmative action of Article 7. Discussion of the motion. No discussion? I think we're ready for a roll call vote.
I think some members have arrived late, but I don't. Suresh Bhatia? Are you here? Okay. Peggy Briggs.
Yes.
Kathy Quokala.
Yes.
Eric Dahlberg.
Yes.
John Garofalo. No. Pat Geyer.
Yes.
Greg Gariello, still not here. Don Kupka, yes. Lindsay Liss.
Yes.
Dee Ortner.
Yes.
Carlin Reed.
Yes, reluctantly.
Paul Rodriguez.
Yes.
Kazi Zadruzaman.
Yes.
Sri Tupul.
Yes.
Lois Wasoff.
Yes.
So the motion passes by a vote of
12 to 1?
5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 yes, 12 yay, 1 no.
Yes.
Thank you. Yep.
Okay. Now, we do have 2 minutes before we have to open the public hearing. Do we want to take care of minutes?
Sure.
Think we can squeeze them in?
I believe we have 2 sets of minutes for April 15 and April 24.
I move that we approve both sets of minutes as submitted.
Second?
Okay.
Any discussion of the motion?
Lois and-
Hearing none, roll call vote.
Peggy Briggs,
Yes.
Kathy Quokala,
Yes.
Eric Dahlberg,
Yes.
John Garofalo,
Yes.
Pat Geyer,
Yes.
Don Kupka, yes. Lindsay Liss,
Yes.
Dee Ortner,
Yes.
Carlin Reed,
Yes.
Paul Rodriguez,
Yes.
Kazi Zadruzaman,
Yes.
Sri Tupul,
Yes.
Lois Wasoff.
Yes.
Motion passes 13 yay, no nay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, any correspondence? I didn't see any new correspondence in the packet. Anything come in? Okay, no correspondence. We can't adjourn quite yet.
I think we can.
So what we'll do, I'll just reiterate the flow of the meeting since there's several moving parts. We'll open the public hearing at 7. We've got about a dozen articles that we'll hear in numerical order, starting with Article 33, MCI Concord Planning. We'll then adjourn the public hearing. We're projecting that'll happen around 9 p.m. We'll see how close we get to that. And then we'll reconvene the regular meeting for purposes of deliberating and voting on those articles that we've heard tonight. Okay, so it's going to be a long night. I did bring snacks. I have my snack bag in the back here.
Yes.
Yay.
With that, I think we can, it's close enough. I think we can open the public hearing. I'll entertain a motion to open the public hearing.
So moved?
Second.
Any discussion of the motion? Hearing none, roll call vote.
Peggy Briggs,
Aye.
Kathy Quokala, Eric Dahlberg,
Yes.
John Garofalo,
Yes.
Pat Geyer,
Yes.
Don Kupka, yes. Lindsay Liss,
Yes.
Dee Ortner,
Yes.
Carlin Reed.
Yes, and Greg Gariello is here now.
Oh, thank you. Hey, Greg Gariello.
Yes.
Paul Rodriguez,
Yes.
Kazi Zadruzaman,
Yes.
Sri Tupul,
Yes.
Lois Wasoff.
Yes.
Motion passes 14 to 0.
Make a brief point of order.
Yes.
I think we're all in the room. I think we can, we don't need to roll call. We can just say all aye, nay.
That's true. We have no members online, right?
Right.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Peggy. Okay, so we're in the public hearing. Before we kick off with Article 33, I do have a brief introductory statement.
Go for it.
Earlier this year, the Select Board approved the schedule of hearings and other milestones leading up to annual town meeting, which will begin on June 2nd this year, 6:30. Reminder, it begins early this year. Late date, but early time. As an important part of that lead up, the Finance Committee has held, or will have held 3 public hearings to review warrant articles with a spending or borrowing component. We don't hear all articles. It's only those articles with a spending or borrowing component. Tonight, this is the last of our 3 hearings. We had our first one on April 10th, our second on April 15th, and today the last on May 1st. You can see the list of articles we expect to hear and vote upon tonight on my screen. The purpose of the public hearings is for article sponsors to present and solicit public input on each article. They also help inform our own deliberations and votes on whether to recommend approval or some other action at town meeting. That is the FinCom's role here. We're not formally approving or rejecting articles. We're ultimately making recommendations to the voters. We can vote one of 3 ways on each article. 1, we can recommend affirmative action, meaning we think it should be approved. 2, we can recommend no action, which means we think it should not be approved. Or 3, a procedural maneuver, we can defer action, which means we need more information. We're not able to take a vote at the time. We anticipate voting at town meeting itself. For each article, we'll hear a brief presentation by the article sponsor. We ask that sponsors limit their presentations to 5 minutes, no more than 5 minutes. I'll then invite FinCom members to ask any clarifying questions. I'll ask members to keep their questions relevant to our scope and responsibilities, which include impacts to spending, borrowing, revenues, and taxes. I'll then turn it over to members of the public in attendance here in the room or via Zoom to ask questions or offer input. Members of the public should limit their comments to 2 minutes. If you're here in the room with us, please stand and approach the microphone. If you're on Zoom, please use the raise hand feature. We'll follow that cadence for all the articles on the agenda tonight in numerical order and then adjourn the public hearing. After all the articles are heard, we'll then reconvene in regular session, likely after a short break, to discuss and possibly vote positions for each article heard during the public hearing tonight. And the regular session will remain open to the public, of course. As with all public meetings, we expect a civil dialogue. Public comment will be limited only to the article or issue being discussed. All speakers must abide by those time limits I mentioned, and all public comments must be directed through the chair, me. We are on the lookout for Zoom bombing incidents. We've got a protocol in place. If that should start, to quickly put an end to it, staff is ready to jump in there. So without further ado, let's kick off the public hearing with the first article on our agenda, Article 33, MCI Concord Planning.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Mark Howell, the Select Board Representative on the MCI Concord Advisory Board, presenting Article 33, MCI Concord Planning. Can I have the motion slide up? I should note that there's a number of members of the MCI Advisory Board in the room tonight, and should we enter into a discussion, we're prepared, we're noticed as a meeting. Article 33 requests the town meeting appropriate $250,000 from free cash for the purpose of evaluating the feasibility of acquiring the MCI Concord wastewater treatment plant and general planning purposes related to MCI Concord. Tonight, I will provide an update on the financials for the current fiscal year, how we've allocated the funds received from the state thus far. I'll explain why we are making this request and outline how these funds can be used in FY26 and beyond to support our ongoing efforts to ensure that Concord is well represented and able to participate effectively in this important redevelopment effort. Next slide, please. In fiscal 25, through efforts from our state legislators, the town received 2 earmarks in the state budget in the amounts of $475,000 and $250,000 for a total of $725,000. The $200,000 of these funds have been committed to the conceptual planning, economic analysis, and market analysis of the MCI site. This effort is being led by the MCI Advisory Board through a contract with Agency Landscape and Planning. $285,000 was allocated to planning and analysis of the MCI wastewater treatment plant, which the state has offered to the town. It's critical to understand this infrastructure and as it exists on MCI Concord and to plan for how it might be used in future development. $40,000 was held in reserve as a contingency for bidding on the concept and planning contract and has not yet been allocated for any purpose. Next slide. We are grateful for the funding the town has received from the state. However, those state funds must be used by June 30th, 2025, or the town loses access to those funds. Although the budget passed in July of 2024, they were not released to the town by the state until February, which has compressed our schedule. Even so, we were able to issue an RFP, award a contract quickly. Assessments and public outreach have begun and are taking place in March through June. They've been scheduled, including 2 events yesterday, which I hope some of you got a chance to attend. And in the coming weeks, more information on that can be found at mci-concord.org/#events. Funds have also been used for the analysis of the MCI wastewater treatment plant to understand its condition, its capacity, and capital needs. ARPA funds were also allocated to expand some traffic study work that was already in progress to better support MCI. Next slide. It's important to remember that Concord has yet to appropriate any town funds toward MCI redevelopment, and although requested, new funding from the state is not expected in fiscal 26. Having access to funds that we can deploy as needed will be important as we get closer to a transaction involving the MCI wastewater treatment facility and to plan for the site as a whole. Remember, the town cannot enter into any contracts without a source of appropriated funds, hence Article 33. Next slide. In preparing for fiscal 26, the MCI Advisory Board, the Select Board, and the Town Manager committed $100,000 of remaining ARPA funds for the use in drafting new zoning for MCI Concord. These funds must be spent before December 31 of 2026, or they will be lost. That's a requirement of the ARPA program. The town has requested from our state legislature representatives a new earmark for the FY26 budget. We further requested that any unspent funds from the FY25 earmarks, remember the $40,000, remain available in FY26. However, the state had received an unprecedented number of requests from cities and towns in the FY26 cycle. And while we are optimistic that our request to extend the availability of unused funds is likely to be granted, there is no opportunity for new funds in this budget cycle. Therefore, in order to ensure that the town has access to some funding that Concord can control and use, it is in its planning, as needed in its planning cycle, we're bringing forward Article 33. Next slide. This slide outlines some potential uses of the funds in 26 and beyond. We expect we may need to provide resources for additional public outreach beyond June 2025, when the current engagement with agency will conclude. There is additional wastewater system planning to be done, including designing how the MCI wastewater system might connect to the town's existing wastewater system, leading to some benefits for the town. Mass DOT has begun a road redesign project that is expected to take 18 months to produce a design. The town needs resources to fully participate in the traffic design and studies for this project as well. Legal support for MCI site options, including input to the state's RFP for redevelopment, due diligence and studies and assessments of the site buildings that may be of interest to the town or for municipal or other purposes, are also likely to be needed, as well as negotiations over the wastewater treatment facility itself. By way of comparison, the town spent $45,000 in direct consulting expenses and about 1,000 hours of staff support working on the MBTA community zoning. The MCI redevelopment effort is much more complicated. And my last slide, we urge your support for Article 33 and the future of MCI property by providing the town with financial resources to address this complex and important planning process. I'd be happy to take your questions.
Thank you. We'll start with questions from members of the Finance Committee. We'll start on that end of the table with this one. Any questions?
Come back to it, please.
Okay.
I do have a question. Can you please explain what your community outreach entails?
Okay. So there is an outreach subcommittee of the MCI Advisory Board, which is doing several things in parallel. One of them is setting up a set of relationship matrix that makes sure that all of the various stakeholders that may have an interest in the property come together. So for example, the next housing roundtable, which is being scheduled, will bring a housing focus. The events that were held yesterday at Juro Park and Harvey Wheeler were an example of outreach to the general community. The website that I mentioned in the presentation, mci-concord.org, was designed specifically to provide community members with information about the site and what events they can connect to, as well as gather direct written input from anybody that wants to provide it. So there's a real multi-pronged approach that's being sponsored by the board to make sure that anybody and everybody that has an interest and would be a stakeholder, which means not only residents, but people who work in Concord, people who travel through Concord, all have an opportunity to provide input about what they think should happen with this site.
Thank you.
Sure.
Other questions going around the table?
I have
Lois.
Mark, could you talk a little bit more about how you arrived at that particular figure? Why
Okay.
250 as opposed to 100 or more?
Yeah. We really took into consideration the information that we were getting back in the RFP process. We don't have a lot of details yet on exactly what the different studies are going to be able to cost us. However, what we did see was that this is bigger than MBTA zoning, that the funding that we typically spend on traffic studies, on due diligence for property, and items like the ones I listed can add up. We thought this was a reasonable amount of spending to ask for. What we need to understand is that when we get to the end of June, we'll have the results of the economic analysis from the consultant. It should inform what kinds of further and more detailed studies we'd want, and then we'd use the normal procurement process. But this gives us something that we thought was significant enough to get us through a year and possibly beyond that. At the end of the budget for FY26, as it stands right now, assuming that we get the opportunity to carry over the $40,000 that we don't expect to spend from this year, we have the $100,000 from ARPA, and this money would allow us to work with a budget of $390,000, although we need to understand that some of those funds are somewhat restricted in terms of what they can be used for.
Thank you.
Sure.
Don.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. I have a couple of questions. First is I want to say full support for the zoning consultant. In fact, my understanding is that that's Concord's primary input into this process is through the change of zoning, that the state will continue to own the site and will do direct development agreements with our input for the master plan that we will be zoning to. So we're going to go through the list here. Due diligence studies and assessments of the site and buildings. One of the first things the committee did was establish that we're not going to duplicate efforts with the state. And the state is doing due diligence and assessments, and they're going to share all of that with Concord. Why would we do additional work?
It's a difference between being the seller of a property and being the buyer of a property. If, for example, there are facilities on that site, and let's say we already know about the wastewater treatment facility, but let's say the shipping and receiving dock or the vehicle maintenance facility that we develop an interest in as a part of this community process for our use in the future, we would expect that we would have to examine those portions of the property more closely. So those are the kinds of things. The other thing we need to understand is that we haven't really budgeted for legal expenses related to input to the state's RFP. So we have layers of control. So the state is committed to taking our input and putting it in their redevelopment RFP, but developing that input so that it really stands up may incur some additional expenses. But those are some examples of why we would do that.
So for the due diligence studies, are you thinking of buildings for town reuse?
Yes. That's one of the range of possibilities, understanding that there is no real design yet for anything in particular.
Okay, so I guess as I think about that task of doing due diligence on that site, it's a massive task, legal due diligence, understanding the title, and I know the state is doing that work and sharing it with us. And if we limit ourselves to, we've identified that we want to ask for this building or this, and have it parceled off,
Yeah.
that would make more sense to me. Have we done that? Have we decided, yes, we're going to ask for some buildings?
No, we
No.
have not decided that.
Or would we spend money before making a determination that we actually want something?
I don't think so.
Okay. Second question is about wastewater. That's an enterprise fund in Concord.
Yes.
Why would we be spending general fund revenues for that?
You'll have an opportunity to talk with Alan a little bit later today, but the project of actually interconnecting the two wastewater treatment facilities will be a pretty major project. And while there are funds in the sewer improvement plan, we've already effectively been able to spend some of the state money on assessing the plant, but that exists in MCI, but the connection between the two is understandably a town priority, because if all we were trying to do was provide wastewater services for the site, we could do that with the existing plant, but the interconnection is a town benefit. So we will probably prioritize for wastewater funding the sewer improvement funds whenever we can, because we want to preserve this relatively modest amount of funding for anything else that's not covered. Those funds are restricted to I would think about it conversely. The funds in the sewer improvement plan can only be spent on the sewer and wastewater system, and so that's an option. But should we run out of those, we don't want to rule out spending other funds if we have them available.
I guess I have two comments to that. One is I know, in fact, some former members of this committee who have their own septic and pay for that, et cetera, and probably wouldn't be able to benefit from this expenditure. But secondly, have we an estimate of the total project? In other words, is it we're going to spend $100,000 now, but $1 million next year because we need to do a final design, and it's going to be I understand what you're talking about, that interconnection. It probably is a big project, so I'm wondering.
It's a good question. The answer is no, we don't really have that, but there's some effort needed to even develop that. The funds that have been spent so far on the wastewater treatment facility have really been about the capacity of that facility, what its capital needs are, what its operational state is, and how does it operate as a standalone. And we have yet to start that more important, I think, to the community question of how does it actually support our ongoing concern about wastewater capacity for our town as a whole.
Okay, so we spent $285,000 this year from the state on that.
Right.
And we haven't gotten to the important question, so it's probably a very
Yeah.
big ask that's coming. That's all.
It probably is a very big ask. I would add to that the fact that we were in a good position to do that was one of the only ways that we managed in the few handful of months to even spend. So you can think about it like we've been able to spend money that was actually directed for general MCI planning on the wastewater system, thereby preserving some of those resources already, and that was a creative way of making sure that we could get as close as possible to spend what our legislators were actually able to give us even before we asked for it.
Thank you.
Okay, other questions? Paul?
Yeah, I just have a short question associated with the timing of this request. What do you think your risk would be if you didn't receive it now and you had to wait for either additional state funding or ask again at the next town meeting?
I think the risk is that Concord loses its leadership position in trying to drive what happens to MCI Concord. Because right now, I would say that we're fairly effectively, through the efforts of the board, being able to stay out in front in terms of vision, in terms of planning, in terms of considering what the important issues are. And we are in a good position at this stage to really be able to decide as a community what we would like to prioritize. If we essentially run out of money on June 30th, then we get what we get for spending nothing.
Thank you.
Kathy?
I have a question for you. The $725,000 that was earmarked by the state, were we able to spend that money?
Yes, that was what I was trying to cover on the slide. So the agency consulting contract, which is getting our base information ready, as well as driving this public engagement process, which is going on from now until June 30th, which is designed to present to the community some of the options from which we could choose. And if you're interested in seeing what those options are looking like, I'm going to put in a plug for joining the MCI Concord Advisory Board meeting on Monday, because we're going to start getting an idea of what those draft scenarios look like. But that's consuming $400,000, and $285,000 is being used by the wastewater system to evaluate the plant. So those are the big chunks. And then because we didn't know exactly how much it was going to cost us to hire a consultant, we had some bid contingency in there, and that's the $40,000 that's left on the table.
So 725 was spent, and you're looking at another 600,000 for fiscal year 26?
So think about the earmark request to the state for 250 and the town meeting article for 250 as being replacements of each other. We will not know what the state budget is until after town meeting.
Okay.
So if we don't act on this at town meeting, we could find ourselves with zero. If that's the timing issue. So obviously, if we had some expectation that we might be successful in the state budget, we'd probably still be asking for this because it's only a maybe, but we would spend in that order. We'd spend the ARPA funds because they're going to expire. We'd spend the state earmark because it's going to expire, and then we'd preserve our town funds as long as we possibly could into the process.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, any other questions? Lindsay?
So I have a couple of questions. So it sounds like for fiscal year 26, you're hoping to have 390,000, that 100 from ARPA, 40 from the carryover, plus the 250 this request?
Right.
Can you give us a general breakdown of how that, for those funding uses that you listed on slide 6, how that kind of breaks down is between outreach, wastewater, traffic, legal support, and due diligence?
I wish I could.
Or can you tell us in just generalizations, what are the biggest expenses on there?
I think that it kind of depends on how how fast Concord comes to its own decision about what to do here. I mean, you can imagine that we get 3 perfect plans and have a big discussion over what those plans look like, or you could imagine that only one thing seems to be. So whether or not we're really ready to proceed with zoning or come up with requirements that we want to see in the RFP depends to some extent on how fast the conversation seems to be resolving. If we have a lot of good consensus about what to do with this site getting into July and August of this year, then we won't spend very much on community engagement. But if the other outcome is that we don't have a lot of consensus on it, then we're going to have to go back and think about how do we get to that consensus. And that's probably going to be the piece that we would prioritize first, because we need that first. The details of whether or not we're doing due diligence on some building that we're interested in, or some portion of the property that we think is good for some municipal purposes, open space or whatever, those kinds of things come much later in the process when we really have already got that vision. So the priorities are to try to come to consensus over what we want to see. The other priority, and you could tell this loud and clear if you participated in the community engagement, is figure out the traffic. People really want us to work with Mass DOT, come up with an idea of what kind of traffic is the envisioned redevelopment going to create, and then how does that factor into a redesign of the Rotary, and so what can be done there. So I could see traffic, being how the land is going to be used and what the effect on the Rotary project is going to be are pretty much the 2 priorities that we would spend on that, as well as really getting down into the details of this wastewater treatment facility.
And then just one second question. If you do get the 250 from the state, will you still spend this?
We would certainly not spend it first. The problem, earmarks are a wonderful thing, and I still, have to say thank you to our legislators every time. But when money is approved in July, you don't get it until February, and you have to spend it by June. It's a kind of a mixed blessing, because it doesn't quite lead to the kind of fiscal behavior that I think we would prefer to see. So this funds, because it's our funds, are unrestricted in the sense that we can spend them on this in the most judicious way possible. And so we would obviously take whatever help we can get, but we need something that we can really plan around. And this is it.
Any questions on that end? Shri.
Just a clarification on the earmark. What's the date on it? You said June or December?
So the end of the state fiscal year. So the 2 earmarks that we received were fiscal year 25 earmarks. So that started on July 1st of 24 and ends on June 30th of 25. So technically all of those funds expire. We have asked for the acronym is PAC, and I believe it stands for Previously Appropriated Commitment at the state level. It's an encumbrance. We have asked for them to treat it like we've committed to spend it in order to retain at least access to the $40,000 that we don't expect to spend, and also as a protection in case for some reason some of the work that we're doing and we're already under contract to have done, if that actually for some unforeseen reason doesn't get completed by June 30th, we don't have those funds to spend on it anymore.
Thank you.
Okay. Greg?
Save for deliberation.
Okay. So those are Finance Committee questions. I'll now open it up to the members of the public for input and clarifying questions, starting here in the room. Would anybody like to offer input or pose questions about Article 33?
Carmen Reese, Town Moderator. I just have one suggestion, and that is that the motion might have language added to it that the funds are to be spent under the direction of the town manager.
Thank you. Anyone else in the room? Seeing no one at the microphone, anybody online?
Yes. Diane Proctor.
Go ahead, Diane, online.
Thank you very much for this helpful presentation. Mark, I remember when all of this was the whole wastewater plant and the opportunity for the town to embrace it was presented. I thought, oh my gosh, this is so exciting. But I've also heard subsequently that it may not relieve us as richly as I had hoped in terms of the burdens to be able to allow our wastewater treatment facilities to work more efficiently. Can you give us a sense for if we are able to buy this wastewater treatment facility and space, to what degree it will actually allow us to build more housing and relieve some of the stresses? Thank you.
Thanks, Diane. This is Alan Cathcart, Director of Concord Public Works. You're sort of in my wheelhouse, so I'd like to help explain. It's a very complex situation we're trying to address. I think the town needs to understand right now, the state has a pretty significant liability in what we call a wastewater treatment plant that is served well beyond its useful life. We're trying to get creative with potentially acquiring this facility only if it provides an advantage to the town of Concord. We're looking beyond the redevelopment of that one campus, because if it was simply tied to that, we could let the private developer take all the risk liability. The town would get potential redevelopment, it would have tax base, that sort of thing, so there's general interest in supporting that. But what I've been talking about for 25 years is we're at the cusp of our existing capacity, which was becoming close to a moratorium for building within downtown Concord. If we built in downtown Concord, the argument is everybody in Concord benefits from that. It's part of economic growth development. We're that close to, we were over our permit limit 4 months out of 12 months for the first time since I've been here this year. So I'm not saying the sky is falling. I'm saying we're running out of wastewater capacity. I've been saying it for a long time. And just like we've said with the roads program, we can forecast these things. We can tell the community this is happening, and we can try to make the best case as to where there's prudent investment. And what we're trying to do is figure out how best to realize an advantage to the town of Concord if we could acquire that facility, but not at the risk and liability of the town, to the benefit of the town. It's complex.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, thank you, Diane. Anyone else online?
We have Peter.
Go ahead, Peter.
Thank you for the opportunity. Peter Lowett, 5 Westvale Drive, MCI Advisory Board member. Just wanted you to just reiterate that I think Mark's done a wonderful job presenting the warrant article, but this is a real opportunity, as you're all aware, for us to take control of our own future. And I think every dollar that we invest in that is likely to produce dividends down the road. And, you know, I just would say we're very unlikely to get any funds from the state government at this point. So I think it's going to be up to us to make sure that we're molding our own future. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. Anyone else online?
No.
Okay. That wraps up Article 33. We'll move on to the next article, which is Article 34, Stormwater Enterprise Fund Expenditures. And again, as you approach the mic, please limit your presentation to 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you. My name is Stephen Dukran. I'm the town engineer. Let's see if we can do it in 5 minutes. Article 34 is about the approval of the FY26 budget for the Stormwater Enterprise, which the budget of which we'll talk about a little bit later. Next slide. Next slide, please. Okay, here. I'm sure you all know what stormwater is, but let's review it for a minute. It is melting snow and rain running off impervious surfaces. It's important to note that it's on impervious surfaces because that's what we use to calculate the rate that will be assessed to users. Stormwater is important to manage because of excess flows will cause flooding, erosion, and they'll carry debris and pollutants into the rivers and streams and ponds. And we have regulatory permits to manage the water quality in those water bodies. Next slide. Reviewing the process, the timeline that we have been working with, it is no secret that this town has been talking about a stormwater utility for some years, but we started in earnest in 2023 when we hired a consultant, Weston & Sampson, to do an evaluation of the stormwater needs and the recommendations to be made regarding the feasibility of a stormwater utility. This led us, well, after having some stakeholder meetings and so on at the end of 23 and the beginning of last year, we went on to get the article approved at the 2024 annual town meeting. That article approved an enterprise and a bylaw, and several months later, we're still on the timeline. Next slide. Several months later, we, leading up to this point, we've been reviewing the budget, the fee structure, and the credit policy with the Public Works Commission. And today we are here where the arrow is, and following, today we'll have the approval of the fee structure at the Public Works Commission in May, later this month, then to be followed by the town meeting article. And upon approval then, we will start a fee collection and put this program to work. Next slide. Just a quick look at what that last town meeting did for us. It approved 2 items. It established the stormwater enterprise and the bylaw that was adopted. And this next slide, we'll quickly look at what the bylaw framework is about. Several sections are included. I wanted to highlight Section 3. The bylaw assigns responsibility for stormwater management to Concord Public Works. Section 5 mentions that the fee is assessed on all properties, and the Public Works Commission is the rate-setting authority. It also brings to attention that provisions would be made for credits for reducing impervious areas, and credit may be provided for low-income households. And there's Section 7 establishes an appeals process for property owners who believe they have been incorrectly charged stormwater fees. So next slide. This year is overall budget we're looking for FY26, $1.06 million, $580,800 in operating, and $482,000 in capital costs. And just diving a little deeper into what those costs are covering. Under operating, $312,800. That's cost is associated with the MS4, which is the Municipally Separated Stormwater Sewer System. It's a federal EPA permit that's the town has been issued since 2003, renewed in 2016, and a new permit is pending anytime soon. As mentioned before, we are regulated regarding the condition, the quality of our water bodies, and so what those items are covered under this, this budget to make sure that we are doing enough work to improve the water quality in these bodies. The last bullet up there, phosphorus, that's become a very important requirement to have that removal from our stormwater discharges. Next slide, $131,000 for asset management type work where we have to figure out what our system is exactly and what the condition is of all of our pipes and structures and management systems. Next slide. Then this is the last few items under the operating costs, including how we're going to manage the work with some staffing, with billing, and some water quality testing. And then we go into the next slide, which is the capital costs. A large part of this is for the phosphorus removal projects under the MS4 permit, and another large amount will be for going towards infrastructure repairs. This will change as in future years because as we start understanding our system, we will be looking at developing more infrastructure improvement projects and to start solving some of the bigger issues regarding flooding and other systematic problems in the stormwater infrastructure. So then we go into the next slide, which is talking about how we're going to raise revenue. The rates are calculated based on what we call an ERU, or equivalent residential unit. This is the average size of a single-family residential. In this town, we have about 4,800 homes, with giving us that ERU of 5,570 square foot impervious area. Then the Western Sampson consultant helped us looking at the targeted revenue budget of $1 million and came up with $118 as that residential unit rate. And now that's applied to two types of fee structures. And the next slide.
Two more minutes, and then we're going to wrap it up.
This first fee structure is for small families, residential, 1 to 3 families, and the different tiers there show the fees for each of those tiers. And the next slide will show the tiers and the fees for the non-residential or the larger residential, which we call the multifamily. There are 10 tiers there, the smallest starting at $118 per year. And just a minute on the stormwater credits. Credits are given for best management practices to those homeowners who will be reducing their impervious area or treating stormwater. It's up to 25% for small residential, up to 50% for non-residential or multifamily, and it is 25% for lower income eligible. And the next slide shows where you can find all documents with this program. The QR code will lead you to that, but it's on our town website. The evaluation report, the fee structure analysis, the credit policy, and other relevant documentation. So finally, I'm going to urge you to support this article, and we're here to answer any questions you may have with us, the Director of Public Works, members of the Public Works Commission.
Thank you. So we'll start with Finance Committee member questions and then open it up to the public. FinCom questions starting on that end of the table this time.
Yeah, just a quick couple of questions. Your capital cost about $500,000. Is that part of a bigger multi-year capital improvement project?
If we go back to the slide, we'll see that a larger part of that is infrastructure improvements for the MS4 program and phosphorus removal. And the other part of it would be for smaller infrastructure improvements. Under the operating cost, we want to do some more investigation of the system, flushing, camera videoing of the pipes to understand, the condition they are. We have 62 miles of stormwater pipes, and today we don't know exactly what we're dealing with. As mentioned, we'll start small infrastructure improvements, but the capital program will grow bigger in future years as we understand what our system is.
And just a follow-up question, and you have 152 for upgrades and repairs. Is that repair or is that capital, is it replacement?
Those are repairs that we can identify now, smaller repairs.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Don?
In comparison to where we are today with staffing, how many people will be working on stormwater going forward?
So well, today we have a stormwater engineer, and we have the highway and grounds group that helps with stormwater work, some maintenance work, but we don't, because of lack of resources, there isn't a significant effort in taking care of our stormwater systems. There are only so many catch basins they can clean. If we were to have a pipe with a bad condition, we'll have to hire out outside services.
Will we continue that practice, do you think, or do you expect to add staff?
Well, without the stormwater fund, is that
Yeah.
a question? Our effort will not continue to be any different than it is today.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I would say other than the $50,000 for billing, I didn't see any additional people or purchases of capital equipment, so that's why I asked. Thanks.
Yeah, but I'm going to understand the question. So there is under the operating cost, $100,000 for help, for staffing help.
Okay. Yeah.
Well,
All right. Thanks.
yes.
Other questions on this end? Lois?
Do you have estimates of how much revenue you think, ballpark at least, will be generated by the fund?
The way the infrastructure is set up between small residential and non-residential, we'll generate about $1 million. $1.1 million, we're allowing 10% for credits, so we should, if things work out, we should have $1 million to work with.
Good. Sure you good? Pat?
Would you remind the room how you are intending to calculate impervious area? Is it roof line, number of bedrooms for the residential?
It's anything that's impervious within the parcel. So it includes the building and the driveways, anything that's impervious, yes.
Follow-up question, will you take into account anything like wetlands?
Wetlands will not be classified as impervious.
Could properties, commercial or otherwise, that abut wetlands have any impact on this? Because the runoff is remarkably different, is it not, from an engineering standpoint, than not having wetlands?
So I want to make sure I'm addressing your question or concern correctly. The model we used here to calculate the rates based on the impervious areas, it's a pretty standard model used by many other communities that have a stormwater enterprise fund, and so it's all impervious area within the parcel, regardless of what the budding uses or wetlands or other types of natural resource areas.
I asked the question because I think you're going to come across a lot of different residential situations. And it's something that I'm hoping your consultants or your staff can really cope with.
Yes. For instance, we already had a question from someone in the public who asked that, well, none of my runoff is really from my property because I have bought woods and so on. So should I get 100% credit? Well, the two parts to that answer. One, the credit is designed to give those who are managing the stormwater on site, making sure the water infiltrates within their parcel. And secondly, the fee, even though it's based on impervious calculations, the fee is not calculated on on what we call common area used by everyone who uses the town roads and parking lots and so on. So those still have stormwater generated and pollutant load and so on that have to be managed. So the fee has a fixed value to it. And that's why when we look at a credit policy, there is a maximum amount of credit that a person will get. It will not, for instance, commercial will not get anything more than a 50% credit, and residential will not get anything more than 25%.
Yeah, Sanviva, Chair of Public Works Commission. Just the hearing on the rates will be in 2 weeks from now. Okay. So there we will go much deeper in it. We had a lot of preview discussions around that. So just to try to simplify, it's, as you pointed out, very complex and how you do it. So if you look at more or less the impervious area, the roof, where you have concrete, where you have asphalt, and so on, do the square footage out of that. And if you do something that deals with the runoff, it has to be according to the standards of engineering, that it is really dealt with in a proper way, not just going somewhere, but that you have the appropriate mechanisms to deal with it. So if you deal properly, then you get it into your backyard in a proper engineered setting, then you get credit. You will never be able to get 100% credit because we always have to account for the general impervious area of the community, all the roads and all the general public parking lots and so on. So there's a base impervious area that everyone needs to carry. So therefore, you cannot credit yourself down to zero. So there's a baseline on that. So that's the thinking, but we want to have an incentive that people do something, specifically the large commercial parking lots, that they do something with their stormwater, and that it is not just running off in town property.
Colin.
Sven, I think I have a question for you, but maybe it's for Steve. Regarding the rate structure hearing, that's May 14th. As I understand, these rates have not yet been approved by the Public Works Commission, and you have a hearing on the 14th. My understanding is also that the rates will start July 1 of this year. Is that information correct?
Best laid plans. No, again, Alan Cathcart, Director of Public Works. The idea of standing up a utility has its challenge, especially when you're dealing with town meeting schedules. The ideal time to start with the new rates and bills would be July 1st. That may not be achievable for a lot of reasons, including we're in a process right now of designing and working with a consultant to actually program our billing software so it could be stood up. The reality is, if we started July 1st, we would anticipate collecting $1.06 million over the fiscal year. If it cannot start July 1st, we're starting something for, perpetuity. If it's late summer, then what we have to do is understand, and you'll see how the motion has been set up, we will spend the money that is brought into the fund. So if we start 3/4 of the way through the year, we'll be limited to $750,000, for instance. So that's by design. And we'd love to start July 1st, but practically that's going to be difficult.
Okay, so a follow-up. So what you're telling us is the maximum amount that you expect to get to ask for under this article is 1.1 million?
1.06.
1.06.
Yeah.
But it could be less than that.
That's
Thank
right.
you.
Yeah. Ellen, you can come back there for a minute. Can you speak a little bit about the program oversight and the strategy associated with that, as well as personnel and time?
Sure. This model, we're sort of following probably about 20 other communities in the Commonwealth we've sort of been observing how they've gone about this. They're all a little bit different, but we anticipate once we start billing, it's going to be, the plan is to include it in our utility billing program where water, sewer, broadband, electric, stormwater would be included. So we're going to need to manage those accounts. So that requires staffing. That's where you saw, part of this, the internal staffing, not to be confused with consultants that we'll use for support. I am a little concerned about the volume and need of customer support early on. And we're trying to understand how best to manage that, mitigate the calls coming in, the frequently asked questions. So we will continue to have, once town meeting approves this, if it does, we'll be doing some significant outreach to try and anticipate and answer questions. Our engineer in Public Works is already doing, stormwater, but we are also, having support from other management within Public Works. So we're looking at the fund, about $100,000, the equivalent of about 1 FTE. It's the equivalent, but we have to be creative. It's not going to be one individual. As far as the management of it, I'll be involved, Steve Dukin will be involved. It just becomes sort of a new program under engineering.
Do you anticipate you're going to have to do any additional training with the homeowners?
Yeah, we anticipate there's going to be a lot of conversation early on. What does it take to get a credit? How did you come to, assess my property X? I will say we're using our GIS, which is a very, strong tool where we can see what's impervious and know the area based on work we've done, before. And so it's using that as the basis, and if people have questions, evaluate that. And if they want and seek credits, trying to establish a procedure that's easy for them to apply. But I will also say on the credit policy, all stormwater systems need to be maintained, whether it's on your property or in the public. Hence, why we need a stormwater utility so we can maintain our infrastructure that we have been sort of neglecting for a long time.
Thank you.
Greg.
So real quick, if it is not approved, what happens?
It's business as usual, less funding than needed, and we may end up, we've recently, the experience Concord has is the Sawbrook, culvert failure on Monument Street that almost wiped out the entire gateway up to Monument with natural gas that didn't have an issue but could have. The see, where's the culvert on Baker Ave, which is $1 million need that we had not planned for, but we identified last year. These are the things that are just going to occur, and we'll react rather than be proactive.
Thank you.
I was just going to comment that the outreach, I think we all sort of assume that you could put it in the water bill or the sewer bill. And we have residents that don't have water or sewer. So this can be their first infrastructure bill to the town, other than electric. And, just reaching out to those folks is going to be really important.
Important, and we've started that conversation, working with our software vendor to try and identify how to capture those properties and take care of the billing for the. Thank you for acknowledging. That's not an easy task either. I would say the existing staff is really stepping up, but we're going to need a little bit of relief once we stand this up.
Okay, 2 quick questions from me before we open it to the public. One, are you concerned about the impact to affordability for residents of Concord, a new fee?
Of course. I mean, that's why we're here tonight. All of our programs were concerned and interested in affordability. The risk that we try to identify is if we don't, then we're not sure we're doing the town any benefit. I think the costs become more prohibitive and reactive. The ability to have a default if you get the benefit of any of the income eligible programs in Concord. We already have a 25% deduction. The basis of the affordability for the small lots, that's where the people with a little less means may reside. Already that's how we have a fee of about $40, $50 a year. So that's baked in. So if you're in a small lot and you're eligible, you'd be looking at $25 a year.
And that's residential. What about businesses? Are you concerned about the impact to businesses and the cost of doing business in Concord?
It's too easy. Yes, we're concerned. We talk to, there are customers as well. The challenge is when you're trying to stand up a fee. I will put this out there, and I will challenge anybody in the Commonwealth or the country to volunteer. They have a program, enterprise, that is going to fully fund what the regulators want. Nobody's going to be anywhere near close to that. What we're talking about is funding pretty much the base needs, the things that we should be doing anyway with a sustainable, reliable source. Commercial properties are different than residential. They have different kind of activities, different kind of uses. We don't get so granular that we look at every commercial, but the small commercial are still looking at maybe $100, $150, a year. But yeah, we're concerned about all these costs to the community.
Eric, if I could just comment that the new revenue source here is going to be large nonprofits that have extensive paved areas, so schools and medical facilities. Not to name anything in specific, but the folks that are being targeted for pilot payments are going to be subject to this pretty significantly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I would note, I believe over 90% of our taxes are residential, and this is more equitable based on impact, and it's not the value of your property, it's the amount of impervious cover.
Okay. Let's open it up to members of the public.
Just one piece of information, San Weber again, Public Works Commission, because it was not in the presentation. Of the roughly 1 million that the fee generates, $500,000 would be from the residential area and $500,000 from non-residential. So just compare that if this would be funded out of the general fund, where it's 93% is residential and 7% is non-residential. So you're shifting the cost because sooner or later you have to fund this somewhere. So you have to fund it either of a general fund, and you have a 93.7, or you have it do it this way and you have a 50-50. I agree, the big surprise will be for the nonprofits. I think many are not aware of it, that they will potentially have suddenly a $20,000 bill there, depending on how big their parking lot is.
Okay, thank you. Let's open it up to members of the public, starting here in the room.
Hi, Terry Ackerman, Eastbridge Road. I'm on the select board, but speaking as an individual for myself. So I have one question and some quick suggestions about the presentation. The question is, the $100,000 that is being added for the staff, is that staff that's being moved, that's being paid now out of the general fund and being moved to this, or is it a new hire, or some of both? So that's my question. Quick question.
The staff we're looking at, and again, we're going to have, it's not just one person, it's one equivalent FTE, is we're looking at funding that through the stormwater and partially funded through solid waste recycling, because we're trying to do many things. You're going to hear about our solid waste recycling program in a minute. We are expanding that, the needs, and in order to have those services, we cannot have the same level staff. In fact, I'm a little concerned about the level of staffing, but we've heard this board and the community loud and clear as far as the concerns and sort of governing staff, but I will not be recommending anything that's going to result in failure. I can't do that.
But is this a new person, or are you?
It would be a new staff person.
Okay.
Equivalent of one new staff
Right.
person.
Okay. Okay, so just a couple of quick suggestions. This May 14th, I guess it's a Public Works meeting that needs a lot of publicity. I just am hearing about it now. It's May 1st already. It's going to need a lot of publicity, and also for the nonprofits, the businesses, everybody needs to hear about it. Secondly, to emphasize in the presentation how much more cost-effective this is going to be than what we have now. You gave 2 examples in the Q&A. One was about the culverts that failed. That is much more expensive than doing it this way. That should probably be in the regular presentation. And that all properties are involved, so it's more equitable. I know we talked about those last year, but people might not remember. So I just think also at the end of the presentation, you had a lot of really good information, Steve, but you were running out of time and you had to go through really quick about the different ways that fees were calculated, the credits. We need a lot more time in the presentation and in the briefing book on that stuff. Thank you.
Yeah, I would just urge that people go to the website. We have lots of information. Again, the town meeting last year was intended to draw attention to this very important need. We've had multiple meetings at the Public Works where we focused on the operating costs, fee structures, and credit, 3 separate meetings. You can see those online. They're all recorded. But the page for the stormwater has various reports and resources that I would urge people spend time. The challenge for us is always, you're gracious to give us 5 minutes, you usually give us 10, but we're trying to pack a lot of information in a very short period of time at this hearing. So I hear the comments, and I just recommend people, if they can, go to the website. We're trying to get it so they're available. We're hoping we might be talking with the League of Women Voters as well to help draw some attention. So,
Okay.
Carmen Reese, 52 Devon Street, moderator. I just want to point out to the Public Works Department that the deadline is coming up quick for materials to go in the town meeting, annual town meeting briefing book. And it seems to me really important that some of the backup materials here that will explain why and how this works should really go in that book, because as much as we would like people to be proactive and notice there's a hearing and attend a hearing and bring themselves to the website, this book is going to come in the mail. So all you got to do is open it and see that there's something important in it. So I hope that we can make good use of that. The other thing I want to observe is that what town meeting is going to be voting on here is the budget for the stormwater program, not anything to do with this fee structure or how it's going to roll out. That is in the hands of the Public Works Commission. So it's going to be a really difficult line to draw, because it's hard to say that your approval of the budget has nothing to do with what you might end up paying as a fee. But I'd be interested in talking, Ellen, offline with you about how we help people draw that line, because I can see very easily going down a deep rabbit hole with specific questions about credits and how rates are determined and so forth, but that's not that town meeting does not have jurisdiction over that. So.
Okay. Other members of the public with questions or comments here in the room? Seeing no one, how about online?
No, but I did get a comment that it's hard to hear some of you guys when you're speaking, so just a reminder to try to speak into the microphone as much as you can.
Thank you. Okay, let's move on to the next article. It's Article 48, authorize expenditure of revolving funds under Mass General Law, Chapter 44, Section 53E and a half. Do we have a presentation for this article?
Okay, good evening. This is an article that often ends up on the consent calendar, and hopefully it will this year as well. So we have a handful of revolving funds that are required to be authorized on an annual basis. And that means that there is a specific budget that is appropriated for these revolving funds. Could you, next slide, please? And actually, we could go to slide 3. So these are the revolving funds that are required to be approved on an annual basis. The ambulance revolving fund is the newest. That was set up a couple of years ago. And this is where we deposit all of our ambulance receipts. And we use that as a source of revenue to offset ambulance expense. Right now, that $1 million, you probably remember we talked about moving from BLS to ALS and the increase in receipts. That is in process. It won't be in place for the entirety of fiscal 26, but hopefully for some of 26. Right now, we're estimating $1 million in the revolving fund in receipts. We typically bring in probably 1.1 or 1.2, but we're planning to use in 26 $1 million to offset fire department expenses. So the way that we have this set up is this money will actually come into the general fund versus moving expense out. So $1 million there. Our regional services housing office, $375,000. This is the consortium of several communities that use the sources of this third-party agency to help with affordable housing initiatives. The town of Concord serves as the host, and so we receive funds, annual fees from other communities to pay the cost of these services. Then we have our road repair, our senior services, tree preservation, and then the other maybe larger one is the visitor center. So all of the receipts that come through the visitor center come into the revolving fund. And then we use that to pay mostly the costs of the tour guides who give tours through town. Next slide, I kind of covered this. So again, the receipts that are coming into these revolving funds are generally related to the activities that are occurring. And let's see. Last slide, I'm trying to make up a little time here. So these are our best guess estimates for the expenses for the fiscal year related to these different activities. There is a process through the year that if there needs to be an adjustment, that's in front of the Finance Committee and Select Board. We haven't had to do that in a number of years. I think the only time we've done that in recent history is with the Regional Housing Services Office. Sometimes they take on another community mid-year and we have to make an adjustment. But otherwise, these are pretty standard, what you see year in and year out. And again, are directly related to the services that are provided by these different agencies and groups. So that's the presentation. Hopefully, consent calendar.
Okay, FinCom questions, starting on that end. Colin.
Carrie, the roads repair, how does this differ from activities that would be covered under Article 8, which is the big roads repair?
Yeah,
project?
did Alan just, all right. Aaron McCloskey, who is our Highway and Ground Superintendent, will take that question. Thanks.
Good evening, everyone. Aaron McCloskey, Highway and Ground Superintendent. The fees that are collected are for right-of-way permits. So when contractors, anybody outside of Public Works Department needs to open up the right-of-way, there's a fee collected, and that's what those fees are for. And then they'd be spent on other repairs, such as infrared patching, the things were listed, crack sealing.
And those things would not be covered under the Article 8 if it passes?
I don't know what Article 8 is.
It's the $27.5 million five-year roads repair program that the Public Works Commission is supporting.
So Article 8 covers capital improvements. Those activities are listed on that slide are more of maintenance, routine maintenance. So typical of what we would do kind of within our own operation. Might be contracted out instead of doing it in-house.
Okay.
The fees for a cutting, like a new driveway.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
So that wouldn't be under 25.
Other questions? Anyone? Lindsay.
Have there ever been instances when the fees collected for these services haven't covered the costs?
Lindsay, can you speak up a little bit?
Oh, sorry. I don't know if this mic is working. Have there ever been instances where the fees collected for these services haven't covered the costs? In other words, has there ever been like a negative or a tax impact, as a result of?
Yeah, so there can't be. If there isn't money in the fund, we can't charge an expense to it.
Thank you.
All set? Okay.
thank you.
Those are FinCom questions. I'll now open it up to members of the public, starting here in the room. Anyone? Seeing no one, how about online? No one online. Okay, that's Article 48. We'll proceed to the next one, Article 49, light plant expenditures and payment in lieu of taxes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the FinCom. Thank you for your time tonight. Just wait for Zach to pull up the slides. My name is Jason Bulger. I'm the director of the light plant. Previous to that, I was the town's chief technology officer for a few years. Go ahead and go to the next slide, Zach. Thank you. So I'm going to walk you through here today the presentation, which includes the pilot and also the appropriation that allows CMLP to expend its budget each year. After several years of some slight variation and a downward trend of sales due to energy efficiency, we're now seeing the effects of beneficial electrification with a gradual increase of sales year over year. Go ahead, next slide, please. Here you're going to see the light plant's net income over the last few years. The light plant does receive an independent audit from the town and has the Financial Audit Advisory Committee review that and write a report each year. In 2019 and 2020, our expenses actually exceeded our revenue, and that was because a cost of service study was badly needed, and new rates were implemented in that 2021 year, which has seen the trend continue that expenses have been less than revenues. The Department of Public Utilities does mandate a return of less than 8%, and we typically target around 2 to 4% each year. The estimated revenue for 25 is $37.2 million, and the estimated expenses is about $35 million. Next slide, please. Here you're going to see electricity sales broken down by class, residential, commercial, municipal, et cetera. I wanted to draw your attention, I'm not sure if this is the new slide deck or not, but the RECs, which are renewable energy credits that the light plant purchases for any power that is carbon emitting to make it non-carbon emitting, are actually going to be down in 25, and that's because more of our power supply that we purchase is actually non-carbon emitting, which will require us to collect less money in RECs and spend less money in RECs. Next slide, please. This is going to show you the power cost categories. So in other words, energy, capacity, transmission, and fixed and other. Fixed and other, just for reference sake, is we're part of the settlement group, the ISO New England, and they actually have some ancillary costs. There's other admin fees rolled into this. Energy is pretty clear. That's the power that we buy to deliver to customers. Capacity and transmission, when we buy electricity, the settlement agency, ISO New England, needs to make sure they have enough for everybody, and for that, they levy a charge, which is we call capacity. Transmission, which you'll see here, is actually quite larger than the previous year. We expect to increase over the next several years as we see kind of widespread electrification, and the result of that is that new transmission lines need to be built, and the cost to maintain and upgrade existing transmission lines is going up. We are actively working on programs that will help lower our transmission costs, and we can do that by finding our transmission peak each year and lowering that. Next slide, please. This is a slide here of power generation by the category. You'll see here that there is no fossil or landfill power in 2025 expected. I will say that the grid mix is whatever the ISO New England provides to us, and that does contain both carbon emitting and non-carbon emitting sources, so it contains pretty much everything. That's why they call it the mix. Some of that is pre-purchased ahead of time and hedged, and some of that is left open on the spot market to make sure that we don't get locked into expensive contracts if power supplies costs were to drop dramatically. And I'll just also mention that you'll see the nuclear is a little bit higher in this year from a contract that was executed a few years ago. Next slide, please. We're going to get into operating costs here. You'll see the largest bucket by far is purchase power, followed by operations and maintenance, depreciation, and a very tiny amount of debt service. The debt service anticipated this year is just $198,000. that does depend on when we borrow money for the middle school project. Some of the largest drivers in the operations budget this year are some big maintenance projects that have been deferred for a little while. Things like roof repairs, HVAC replacements of one large vehicle, overhead and underground maintenance, and a new SCADA system, which is a continuous monitoring system that will allow us to look at and react to problems on the grid. Next slide, please. Here you can take a look at the capital outlay, and you'll notice that 25 has quite a large jump. I will mention that last year was kind of a transition year for the light plant. I was appointed as the interim director in January and named the permanent director in September. So I would say that the 24 number is probably a little bit low, and the 25 number is including the $7.5 million that was appropriated at town meeting for the middle school solar and battery project. So that number is probably a little bit higher than normal. And I mentioned some of the expenses that will fall under depreciation are the SCADA system, the new vehicle. We are purchasing one large transformer that will go at the substation to replace one that's over 20 years old, and some roof and parking lot repairs. You'll see here the underground fund mentioned. This is a separate line item that we keep in a restricted account. You'll see it's actually a separate line on your bill, and it's kept in a restricted account that's only used when we underground new areas of town. So this is not just any underground work that we might do, but it's actually bringing overhead areas of town to underground. These areas become more resilient, less likely to go down in an outage due to trees falling or storms, and are a benefit to some of the historic areas of town by not having to see utility poles there. Next slide, please. Here you'll see the gross margin, which we anticipate at $2.2 million this year. The DPU, as I mentioned, does mandate a return of no higher than 8%. This is in line with kind of the light board's guidance and our long-term plan for where we'd like to see our rate of return. We do work extensively with the light board on that. It's a topic that they spend quite a lot of time on, is the operating forecast and the rate setting for the light plant. Next slide, please. So here in summary, the pilot is calculated to be $451,000 this year. And that pilot is calculated based on a formula, which is basically the gross number of audited kilowatt hours sold multiplied by $2,750 per million kilowatt hours. So that figure varies. As I showed previously, we did see kind of a lowering of kilowatt hours sold over time. That has changed as of about 2 years ago, and we're seeing that go up. So we would anticipate this to increase a little bit each year. And that's the last slide for CMLP. Would you like me to wait and offer questions now, or go through telecom as well?
Why don't you proceed, but if you could move quickly, I'd say 2 more minutes.
Absolutely. Telecom, also known as broadband, is our fiber to the home service. We have been offering the service since 2014. Speeds up to 1 gig. Please go to our website, concordma.gov/broadband, if you're interested. We do have a low income discount. And you'll see here, that's a typo, should say December 24, but almost 1,800 active customers. We are seeing subscriptions grow almost 4% in 2024, and our net income of $270,000 last year. Next slide. Here you'll see the revenue sources. We do have a lot more residential customers than commercial customers, but the commercial customers do have faster speeds and pay a little bit more for their service because of their guaranteed response time. The municipal is holding flat. The other revenues are special jobs that we might do for people, other departments or other entities, and work that gets billed out. And also the installation fees are collected separately from those revenues for monthly fees. Next slide. This just shows the active customer count trend line, and you can see total in the red line there, and then residential and commercial below. Next slide. I'll just spend just a brief moment talking about the forecasted plans. One of the things that we are working on and have spent many months on is trying to get more accurate information to applicants who apply. If you have a utility in your area where there's already wired service to every home, it's easy for you to predict how quickly you can spin up that service. For us, starting from the ground up, we don't have fiber in everyone's home today. We have to install it in any new location. And that installation time and cost can vary wildly depending on whether you're in an underground area, an overhead area, whether you require a police detail, whether you might not have conduit going to your house that can be used. And so we have actually gone through every data point we have in town to help identify to customers who are interested to sign up how quickly we might be able to get service so they can better plan. And we're finding that that's going to result in more customers who sign up and then actually get the service and follow through becoming a customer. We're also doing a big upgrade, the first in about 10 years, to move our core switching infrastructure from a GPON to XGS-PON, which basically just means faster speed, more density. We will be able to serve more commercial customers like Emerson Hospital, like the school district, that we can't today because our speeds top out at 1 gig today. And we'll also be able to increase the density on those same fibers so we don't have to actually run additional fibers in some areas, which will save capital costs long term. This was a pretty big upgrade, about $300,000, but planned for through depreciation with the assets that we purchased when we started. Next slide, which I believe is the last slide. Oh, no, sorry, there's a couple more. We're also looking at filling a network engineer position, which the broadband division actually provides support for broadband customers as well as the town, focusing on marketing and outreach, and then really working on expanding the availability of fiber into any areas that it's not possible to get today. Next slide. Here you'll just see the net income over time. Again, this is separate from the light fund. We do track telecom as a separate fund. And the forecast, the expenses are a little bit higher this year, and that's because of that large upgrade. After that, we would anticipate them dropping down a little bit. And this does count the unfilled position that's still unfilled today. And I believe, next slide, this is just the motion again. All right, so I'll stop there.
Okay. Finance Committee member questions on this side? Anyone? Don?
So the pilot payment is $451,000, and this may be a question more for Anthony. The town budget light fund is on the revenue side is $662,446. So where's the $211,000 difference coming from?
I believe you're referring to more the indirect costs that CMLP pays. CMLP pays for a share of IT, HR, finance staff, so that may be that's what you're looking at.
It's on the revenue side of the town budget.
Right, yeah, that's what that is.
I'm sorry?
It is the indirect cost that CMLP pays for in contributions to other town departments for the services that it receives. As an enterprise, CMLP can't receive the help of HR, IT, other departments without contributing. So that's based on formulas derived from the town manager, the CFO, and myself.
So that's kind of a payment in kind?
Exactly.
I see, thanks.
Okay. Other questions? Colin?
The forecast that you've given us is based on a calendar year, not a fiscal year. So it ends December 31, 2025. But your big project is time of use, and that's going to start first part of January 2026. How's that project going? Can you give us just a short synopsis of that? Because none of that information is going to be related to this forecast, right?
Correct.
Okay.
So the CMLP is on a calendar fiscal year because of the Department of Public Utilities and the reporting that we have to do. Time of use is expected to go live in January. It is going to be a really big redesign of rates. Instead of charging volumetrically for your electricity, charging more the more you use, we'll be charging more if you use electricity during a peak time. That will actually empower consumers to maybe lower their costs for electricity by shifting some of their load to an off-peak time. The intention for a rate redesign is not to collect more money or different money. We're going through an extensive cost of service study right now so that we can make sure we accurately collect our revenue requirements for next year when those rates go live. But you're right in that it will change how we bill customers, and it may impact some customers' bills. Most people who use a steady amount of electricity through a day will have the same bill before and after. It's the people who can or cannot shift their load away from a peak that may see their bills go down or go up. I don't anticipate it changing our expenses or our revenues dramatically one way or another, because the cost of service study will intentionally try to collect the revenue that we require next year.
Anyone else? D.
What are your sources of nuclear power?
Sources of nuclear power.
Yeah.
The Seabrook power plant mostly.
Are the costs higher than the other, on the slide that you presented, you had various sources. So where do they fit in?
Yeah, I can't specifically say what the cost of any particular power supply is, but I can tell you nuclear is among the least expensive forms of power, and it's definitely the least expensive form of non-carbon emitting power.
So is that ever going to get bigger in your chart?
Yes, so, I mean, it got bigger from last year to this year, and I think there is a slight escalator on the current contract, and, you know, we look at every contract that becomes available to us, and we bring it to the light board if it can fit within our portfolio. We don't want to become overhedged. Some communities have actually done that. They find themselves having to sell back power at a loss, so we don't want to get there. So we try to have a diverse portfolio, but the light board is really the group that kind of advises and recommends which contracts we take or which ones we don't.
Mm-hmm. And your underground sources, or have you ever experimented with like utilidors?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Underground sources?
Underground sources like geothermal?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the Climate Action Committee does have a network geothermal subcommittee. We've been in conversations with them along with our sustainability director to pay attention to the pilots that are going on right now and understand where CMLP could fit into those conversations. So we're definitely aware. We're also looking at the Mass State the Clean Heat program and the mandates there to make sure that we're falling in line with that. But so I'd say we're aware of it, but there's nothing under development today, but we're definitely keeping an eye on it.
Thank you.
Good. Okay. Members of the public, anybody in the room have questions or comments? Seeing no one, how about online?
Nobody online.
Yes.
Mark Howell, just super quickly, on the revenue chart, I noticed that the exact same number was for revenue for 24 and 25. So that seemed kind of unlikely to me. The one with the columns. Yeah, but not the table.
Zach, out of curiosity, is this the presentation that was sent today or the one sent earlier? Do you know? Okay, so it's probably been updated, Mark. That's a good question.
Okay. Online, do we have any hands up?
Nobody online.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's Article 49. Article 50, Solid Waste Disposal Fund Expenditures.
Good evening. I'm going to introduce our subject matter expert in Concord Public Works, Justine St. John. She oversees this program. She is our program analyst.
Thank you. Good evening. Could I have the first slide, please? I'm here tonight presenting Article 50, which is Solid Waste Disposal Fund Expenditures. This is the article as presented. The purpose of this article is to authorize the town manager to use cash on hand in the Solid Waste Disposal Fund and user fee revenue from fiscal year ending June 30th, 2026 to operate the town's pay-as-you-throw curbside solid waste and recycling collection and disposal program. The program consists of two major components: curbside collection and disposal, including recycling and drop-off days, and operation and maintenance of the town's composting site, including the former landfill. And this has been a routine annual action. Next slide. The goal of the solid waste and recycling program is to provide an efficient, sustainable, and cost-effective solid waste collection, disposal, and recycling service for the subscribers of the town's curbside program. Slide 3. As many of you know, the municipal solid waste and recycling program was updated in October of 2024. The updated program includes single-stream recycling, weekly automated collection, and town-issued leased carts for solid waste and recycling. It does remain a pay-as-you-throw program. Next slide. The number of curbside subscribers has increased since the introduction of the new program, and the number of subscribers now is the largest in the program's history. Next slide. There are also several additional opportunities for residents to recycle or dispose of items, such as the semi-annual drop-off swap-off day. One is this weekend. Unfortunately, we did have to cancel the swap portion, just to let all of you know. Unfortunately, due to the weather, we weren't really sure, so, but drop-off is still on, so come on down. The household hazardous waste days at the Minuteman Hazardous Household Product Facility in Lexington, which are held monthly from April through November. And then we do still accept batteries, fluorescent bulbs, and intact mercury items during business hours at the Public Works Building at 133 Keyes Road. Next slide. So the compost site at 755 Walden Street is open seasonally, April through December, and accepts the following items: usable latex paint, styrofoam in pre-purchased bags, mattresses by appointment only, invasive plant species, branches and brush, and leaves and yard debris. And processed compost is available for residents throughout the season. This is a summary of the projected program expenditures. The largest expenses are the curbside collection contract and recycling, processing, and waste disposal services, followed by general fund services. After the successful negotiation of the recent 3-year solid waste and recycling contract, Concord Public Works refined how contract costs will be allocated between recycling, processing, solid waste collection, and solid waste disposal in FY26. So you will notice that in the budget book, that this reallocation of costs creates significant increases in recycling, processing, and solid waste disposal costs, while providing a substantial decrease in collection costs. The overall impact of this cost reallocation and the savings negotiated in the new contract reduces the net cost of curbside collection and disposal by 6%. Because of the 3-year contract, we know and are able to plan for the cost increases for the next 2 years as well. Next slide. The largest revenues collected are from subscription fees, followed by school facilities and overflow tag revenue. Total projected solid waste revenues for FY26 are $2,398,798. Next slide. The current subscription fees are $245 for 6 months. This includes weekly collection of a 35-gallon solid waste cart and a 96-gallon recycling cart. Based on customer feedback and the need to transition billing software, Concord Public Works will be recommending for solid waste and recycling to become a monthly charge as an additional utility on the same monthly bill as other town-operated utilities, similar to what you heard earlier with stormwater. Our proposal will include the ability for customers to opt to receive monthly bill that includes all their utilities or a monthly bill by individual utilities. And next slide. And that is it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Finance Committee member questions, starting on this end of the table this time. Anyone? Colin?
Justine, when will the billing change to monthly?
We anticipate we are going to be proposing that to the Public Works Commission, but our cycle ends through September. Everyone's paid through September 30th, so it would be after that.
So starting October 1?
Either October 1 or November 1, yes.
Thank you.
Other questions? This side of the table. Okay. Public input here in the room. Any questions or comments? How about online? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's Article 50. Next is Article 51, sewer system expenditures.
Again, Alan? Oh. Are we good? Testing, okay. May I ask, and I do this every year, and I think I should do this earlier, if we could order so we could go to Article 53. I ask because water covers 95% of our community, sewer 30, and there's a lot of common themes. Is it possible to kind of advance to Article 53? Is that okay?
That's okay. We do have to take each article individually, though, so we'll do 53
we will,
first.
and I'll go back to,
Okay.
Article, the sewer, if that's possible. Well, we're bringing that up online. In essence, this is a routine article. Really, it looks to authorize the town manager to expend funds through our sewer user fees, special service fees, and existing reserve to the operations and capital for the water enterprise system. Next slide, please. Very brief overview, and I'm going to move quickly so you can ask questions. I understand that many are familiar with this. So for the audience, we have assets that value about $2.58 million. There's a surface water supply, NAGOG, 6 groundwater supplies, pumping stations, advanced treatment systems at some of those, 2 large reservoirs, over 134 miles of pipe, water main, and over 1,300 hydrants. The utilities, especially in the water wastewater universe, are strongly driven, our programs through regulatory compliance, primarily when it comes to water quality. Usually that's the control that really drives our cost for water production and treatment. Next slide. Very high-level overview of our operating expenditures. We're looking just over $6 million. You can see from the pie chart that about 60% is dedicated for pump, treat, distribution, and storage. You'll see the red portion, the general fund service, much like the light plant. Those are contributions for support that we get from other town departments who support our operations, whether it's in finance. Some of it actually is over at the light plant for customer service, NRC, Board of Health, that sort of thing. You see depreciation is factored into our operating costs. On a very high level, this is kind of itemized the major programs, projects we have in the capital plan. You can see it's close to $5 million. We've talked last year about the significant needs we're going to be spending towards water treatment. We will start ramping up those costs. When you see the $1.9 million, that's for design. I will identify that for a lot of reasons and complications with NAGOG and its source, we need to treat NAGOG for PFAS as well as much broader surface water filtration. We have Hugh Cargill well and Robinson well that need PFAS treatment, and given the complexity of NAGOG, we're actually going to prioritize the groundwater wells first. So we're going to put a lot of effort in FY26 into the getting a consultant on board and getting the design. We have a compliance schedule of 2029 for all of those supplies. Meter replacement I'll call out because that's going to affect a lot of customers and residents. We're going to need to get into their homes and businesses to replace out technology that's been outdated. Working with the light plant on that base technology platform. Source protection, we have money set aside to pursue long-range regional planning with MWRA and potential expansion into the Metro West area. We're partnering with about 10 other communities in the Metro West to do a feasibility study to build on what MWRA did recently about 2 years ago. We're talking at that point about $1.2 billion to bring MWRA into the area. I think it's well worth considering that. That's probably a 10, 20-year plan, but we need to start that sooner rather than later. Those are the high-level things I'd sort of draw your attention to. Next slide. As far as rates, one thing that's notable, our rates, as we anticipated last year and mentioned, the closure of MCI is a significant impact on our customer base. I forget the percentage, but maybe up to 10% of our demand was, provided to MCI. That loss of revenue is very real. We talked about a 12.5% rate increase that we're going to need to pass along. On a positive note, it provides some reserve or some capability for the new redevelopment, but there is a cost to that. So between the revenue loss that we had from MCI and the capital needs on water treatment that we've talked about, we've told you that 12.5% is going to be proposed at the rate hearing in June at the Public Works Commission. And I'll remind you of it's a conservation-based three-step process. Base level costs are what sort of we consider essential, and those who have the need or desire to have more water for irrigation, that sort of thing, we still try to accommodate, but it comes at a cost. We also offer a discount rate for those need-based residents. Next slide. You can see we've always followed a 10-year planning horizon, given the significant capital investments. What you can see is a fund balance. We always talk about with FinCom, why so much money? Because we know we're going to be tapping into that eventually. As an enterprise, we can do that. You'll see the capital plan really spikes in 27, 28, 29. That's the water treatment I just talked about. And you can see the debt service, or debt expense is going to obviously increase as we start paying off the debt for those capital projects. Next slide. How was that?
Great. Thank you.
All right.
Okay, FinCom questions starting on, I think this end this time. Any questions? Colin.
Okay, Alan, on your capital plan, is this part of that $50 million that we authorized last year?
Yes, thanks, Carolyn. A reminder, and it's no small issue, last year we got $50 million of borrowing authorization. Just like any time you get authorization, we will only draw upon that when we are spending that down. So that is baked into the financial model, yes.
So I'm seeing in your capital plan on your slide number 7, the red bars total more than $50 million.
Yes, so we actually have some, again, if you look at our reserve, we have 10 million, over 10 million there, and then we have some remainder of a borrowing back in 2016 or so.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. Public input. Any members of the public have questions or comments about this article? And again, that's Article 53, water system expenditures. How about online? Okay. That's Article 53.
That was Article 53, water system expenditures.
Which one would you like to cover next? Do you want to go backwards?
We're now going to go to 51 and 52. That is sewer system expenditures as sewer improvement fund expenditures.
Okay.
We generally introduce those together.
Start with Article 51, sewer system expenditures.
Okay. As you're bringing up the presentation for Article 51, I do want to just take a quick sidebar to introduce Darren LaFollum. He is, Darren, if you could stand up. He is our brand new water sewer superintendent. My expectation is next year you'll be hearing from him at this podium, but with 2 weeks under his belt, I didn't think that was quite fair. In any event, so much like the water, I won't repeat the fact the intent is to authorize town manager to expend the funds through the user fees collected, special service fees, and fund balance. Next slide, please. The infrastructure, about $18.8 million of assets. We do have just one advanced wastewater treatment plant off of by Great Meadows. We have 2 large, kind of more, not neighborhood, but more regional for Concord pump stations at Lowell Road and the Assabet station on Main Street. We have 6 neighborhood lift stations, about 34 miles of collection main, and 900 manholes. Oh, and very important, the service area, if you go back, please, Zach, is kind of centralized in the more denser areas, the downtown parts, as we mentioned, as far as some neighborhoods have septic systems. They do not pay user fees, obviously. So just to clarify that. Next slide, please. Significant expense for operating is the contract management. We have a third-party consultant who does the contract management, Woodard and Curran. They have it's a 10-year, it's a sequence of a number of 4-year contracts up to 10-year total commitment. We have a significant depreciation expense. I will remind people that the last significant investment we made in our wastewater treatment plant was in around 2007. We're getting to the point where 20 years later, we're going to start talking about need to reinvest in our existing facility. And you'll see general fund contributions and personal services and purchase services, just distribution of where our operating expense, close to about $3.7 million a year. Next slide, please. As far as the capital, I think the most notable thing, and I want to clarify because there's lots of conversation about MCI. When we were baking this capital budget back in the fall, trying to be sort of anticipate where we're going, we had no idea how close, this was when we were first learning that we had the opportunity to potentially purchase or acquire the treatment facility at MCI. We have $1 million identified in our budget that would be drawn through the sewer improvement fund. That's money that we've collected to allow for potential expansion of our assets. This is anticipating that if we were to be more involved, and it's likely we won't be, but if we were more involved and it's DCAM, the state helping us navigate, there's a need for significant improvement to that facility yesterday, not tomorrow. We know that. So we wanted to make sure we had funds, if nothing else, not just to assess existing conditions, but start designing the improvement needs that we know are needed. And so that's where that $1 million is. If we don't go there, we're not going to spend that. The other area of interest I'd suggest is the $199,000 for the sewer station structures. One improvement we just finished was a new generator at one of our neighborhood lift stations. We're proposing another one in the Cousins Park. That's really to help with reliability, resiliency for power supply issues. So that's important. And then on the wastewater planning for $200,000, again, back in the fall when we're baking our budget, we still know we need to do something with our comprehensive wastewater master plan. Some of our focus has been diverted over to MCI for the obvious reasons. They're the most obvious potential relief valve, but we can't count on that. So we have monies that would allow us to pursue other options that may be less advantageous but have nothing to do with MCI. So that's what that funding is for. Next slide, please. As far as rates, I'm beginning to be very clear. We're talking about rate increases based on not acquiring MCI. So the 30–40% of the community served by our existing system is not going to be burdened by MCI liabilities. It's what does it take to maintain the existing system and start planning for the improvements that we know at the wastewater treatment plant to the tune of about $9 million over probably a 2 to 5 year period. But that's baked into our 10-year pro forma, and we're looking at about 5% increase a year to meet those needs. Next slide, please. This will show, in essence, again, the fund balance that we have available, which is for these capital improvements, primarily for the wastewater treatment plant that we own. I will say the red bar does include, and this is, we can redo this slide, that does include expenditures that could be realized if we were going to go and support and invest in MCI. I would argue if we do that, that's going to be where there's a discussion on how much of that contribution is actually comes from the state as far as theirs. That facility still serves their needs. The farm, the police, MassDOT, it has to exist for them in the short term, but if we need to start spending money, that's part of the negotiation we need to do with DCAM as far as what does the state own, what does the town own, and then what does future development need to put, sort of at least plan for. Next slide.
Okay.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So that's Article 51. or Article and 52. I believe for purposes of public input, we need to take them separately, just to be clear. So does anybody have any input on Article 51, sewer system expenditures, here in the room? Oh, I'm sorry. I skipped FinCom member questions.
That's
Colin.
okay, you can do public works, I don't care. I see a red flag, and it's your slide number 11. Can you explain to me why the total expense will exceed the total revenue for fiscal year 27 to 35 for Article 51 and 52? Red is bigger than blue, why?
Okay, so we're looking at red is bigger than blue, where the total expense,
Losing net income, you're losing money every year.
Yeah.
You
So what's going on?
It increases over time.
Bob, can you help? Is that partly because we've got the MCI?
That's exactly.
Yeah, so.
Can he come to the
Yeah,
microphone?
I'm sorry. It's partly because we're including the MCI investments of $25+ million into the expenses. And I think, that's a legitimate, we need to clean that up. It's basically us trying to find the right balance between the town system and expanding. So I think, we'll look at that slide, clarify that for you. Thank you for drawing attention to it.
Other questions? Peggy?
Alan, I've heard a rumor, it might not be true, that the issue with wastewater capacity, it's not the plant. We have capacity in our plant, but we don't have capacity in our discharge permit. Is that correct?
That's very correct, and that's very important.
So
Yes.
is it good timing to go after that more discharge permit right now?
Yes, and we did 5 years ago. In fact, we appealed our permit. We got it presented to the Environmental Appeal Board in EPA headquarters in Washington. This region, New England, EPA is very resistant to increasing flow through existing discharge permits. I think the tenor across the Commonwealth is maybe it's a little more ripe. There's other communities dealing with the same challenge, in essence. That's still on the table, and I think that's part of a broader negotiation with EPA and DEP as well. But we could push more treatment through our existing facility. It would increase electric costs, chemical costs, but that's modest compared to the capital needs. So we could do a couple $100,000 with very modest improvements, and we could do even more than that with some more major improvements. But that's still part of our, it's in our arsenal, but it's not up to us, it's up to EPA.
Good luck.
Alan, I remember we touched on this once before, but I don't remember the answer. Is there a big increase in the throughput during rain?
Yes, thank you. So with wastewater flow, you have to remember they were designed over 100 years ago, these old systems, clay pipes, and 100 years ago, discharge was simply get it from the downtown areas to a local water body. In the 50s, people made improvements, so they started treating some of that discharge just because of the aesthetic nuisance. It was for the local community. In the 70s, we have the Clean Water Act, where the federal government decided you need to do more cleaning, so there was more investment. Really wise, it was necessary, but 90% of those improvements for facilities were state federal funded. They do not pass the burden to the community. It was, 90. So the issue is the inflow that comes into the pipes causes, it's not water that's just groundwater,
Right.
infiltration.
Okay, so my
And
question
we have,
then, if I could just cut, because
please.
for time.
Yep.
How much capacity could we gain if we dealt with that problem?
We are spending a couple $100,000 a year, and I think we have, we're fairly tight.
Well, what's the capacity delta is my question.
It would vary depending on season and
It's
groundwater
40%,
elevations.
50%, 80%? How much does it increase when we have rainstorms?
It can, well, let's put it this way. The peak flows can exceed 2.5 million gallons a day, and our average flows are around about 1 million gallons a day peak.
Okay.
Yeah.
So as we look at adding discharge capacity, could we do a cost benefit looking at, well, if we just put the stormwater, put the ground source water out of our sewer system, we could gain another 20 years of capacity or something of that sort, and that may be the most cost effective. Second question, your base case is that we're acquiring MCI and we're spending money. And I'd like to see a base case that isn't that, so then we can evaluate the cost benefit of acquiring MCI plant.
I'm sorry, so where we don't spend money to get say that again, so I understand.
The base case in your presentation is that we do acquire the MCI plant and we spend money on it.
Yeah.
How can we evaluate that, though? We would want to know what would be the cost without doing that, and then see the cost and the benefit of that. So that's my second question. My third is there's $1 million in Article 52 for wastewater capacity optimization, MCI. Is that study or is that physical work?
That's the engineering to do the upgrades of the treatment facility.
So how does that differ from the $250,000 that we discussed earlier for?
I can't speak to that planning and wastewater so much, but I know that's planning and wastewater. As far as my budget allowance is for the facility, not so much the planning.
Okay, so this million seems more, realistic, I guess, and it's in the right place. It's in the wastewater enterprise fund. Is there any possibility of shifting that cost to the current users of it, or no? It's all one. In other words, that has one user. It's multiple facilities, but it's the state, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Should the town be? Does it feel right to you? And I defer to your judgment on that.
Yeah. So we're drawing from the sewer improvement fund, which is always challenged because it seems like it's expensive for people who come into the system and they're expanding the service. But at this point, it's probably an outdated number, but it does provide funds for us to expand our infrastructure facilities, whether it's pump stations or treatment. In this case, we've exhausted a lot of other options as far as where can we get capacity. So this is work towards potentially realizing some value of treatment at that facility. So it's a risk like we would do a groundwater modeling risk somewhere to potentially serve a small part of the community. It's not a guarantee, but we have the funds to invest, and it's not the ratepayer, it's the people who bought into the system. So it's kind of for the intended purpose of trying to create capacity. That's its goal.
Thanks.
Well, and just to emphasize, the reason it's valuable to put the capacity there is not the, crappy treatment plant. It's the permit going into the Assabet River.
That's very correct. That permit is gold. Yeah.
Okay. Any other FinCom member questions? Okay, now public input. And we'll start with Article 52, Sewer Improvement Fund Expenditures. Anybody in the room? Anybody online? Okay. Article 51, Sewer System Expenditures. Anybody in the room? Anybody online? No. Okay. Thank you. Okay, we'll do a quick time check here. It's just after 9. We have 5 articles to go. So let's power through the public hearing with these 5 remaining articles, and then we'll close the hearing and take a quick break. Next up is going in numerical order, Article 54, authorize expenditures from PEG access and cable-related fund.
Good evening, everybody. Just like to make a brief introduction. I'm Amalia McCaffrey. I'm the CIO for the town of Concord, and with me is Julie Manukian, who is our...
Amalia, a little closer to the microphone. Thanks.
our Minuteman manager, and we will be briefing this evening our proposal. So just to kick off, we delivered the proposal to our PAC committee on January 16th, where we received concurrence, and we're here this evening. So I'll try to make it brief, but want to make sure that we cover all of the major areas. So as I would say, bottom line up front, we are requesting $526,580, of which $105,000 will be reserved for capital improvements for approval. Next slide. All right, just to cover a bit of our accomplishments for FY25 for the team. So obviously we just completed the 250th event, and the Minuteman media team was front and forward and covered a lot of ground that day, and we're quite happy with the work that they did, along with multiple volunteers from the community that assisted our team in order to make that day successful. So in addition, we did complete the installation of the new broadcast server at Minuteman Studio, which allows us to launch our Roku and Apple applications on demand for streaming at no cost to the residents, which I think is a huge win. So that installation was completed just a few months ago. Additionally, we launched the Spotify podcast for the town of Carlisle, which included, of many things, the town administrator's report, and more recently, they just completed 17 warrant article informational videos for the town of Concord that are being broadcast or that are on our Spotify podcast. And then finally, while we're counting it as a FY25 accomplished, we plan to film and live stream our town meeting here in June and at the Concord Carlisle High School. Next slide. The things that we're looking to do, that the team is looking to do in FY26, is updating the Minuteman Studio at CCHS. It is something that has been on our agenda, but just has not been completed in our focus. Now that we're moving forward, is to do those studio upgrades, and I'd like Julie to talk briefly about what those include, because it's sort of a long time coming, and we really need to do that. We have a lot of use in the studio, and we anticipate more use in the studio. And one of the things I'd like to highlight is because of their location, they have block time for the students at the high school that come over into the studio and actually use the studio. It's phenomenal to watch the students be able to do that, and we want to be able to provide them a premier space to do so. So Julie, just...
Yes, so with these funds, it would be buying new studio cameras, lighting grids, audio mixer, soundboard, just to make it better more updated for when the students come in.
I think we'll all appreciate this next one. We are looking to do the redesign of this specific room for the acoustics, for the equipment that we need to complete in this room, just because, as we know, number one, it's very difficult to hear. But for our portion, we would, when the room is looked at, we will need to do upgrades to the suite in the back room in order to complement whatever's done in this room, so that we can just get better quality production when we're in here. Additionally, Julie would like to purchase new field cameras and tripods and mobile audio units, which just increase the capacity for the studio. And then finally, personally I do find that it's very, very important in the investment of our professional development of the folks over at MMN, because, as you know, technology is ever changing, the industry is ever changing, and in order for us to continue to provide quality and up-to-date and broadcasting and services, the folks need to be able to go out into their field of expertise and talk to their counterparts and do that training and do that interaction. So we'd like to have while it is an expense, I'd like to think of it more as an investment in our folks. Next slide. So not much has changed on this, other than I just like to highlight that the majority of, obviously, our revenue comes from our Comcast franchise fee. And I would like to highlight, and I'd like Julie for just a brief note to talk a little bit about Carlisle, because we are seeing an uptick in the work that we're doing for them, and we think that it's based upon what we're seeing thus far, that that's going to continue to increase going into the next fiscal year.
Yes, originally we would just film 2 Carlisle Select Board meetings a month, but that has grown. They've asked us to do special projects. For example, they asked us to create 17 videos ahead of their Carlisle town meeting, and these 17 videos were warrant explainer videos for residents to understand what the votes meant, yes and no. They also asked us to do a winter safety video where we filmed the Carlisle Police Department and the Fire Department and the Public Safety Department. And in addition to that, their town administrator, Ryan McLean, has launched a podcast. So after every Carlisle Select Board meeting, his town administrator report becomes a podcast. So we're getting a lot of those out. So it's really a lot of extra. Good work.
Next slide. Or not? Maybe. Next slide. Thank you. Back one, I think we missed the important one, operating expenses. So I'd just like to highlight, the categories have not changed from what we briefed last year. Obviously, our largest expense category right now is our personnel costs. We have 3 full-time personnel that work in Minuteman Studio, and then we have 2 limited status employees that help us cover different events that are going on. And those are very, very helpful to the team and allow us to do greater coverage and allow us to be able to say yes to the requests that come in. And then obviously the purchase services, just as a brief explanation, that's really our licensing for the products that they use to do editing and various things like that. And then in the other charges, that's where we allocated the professional development, and then the final category is our payback to the general fund for HR services that we utilize in order to fulfill vacancies and such. Next slide.
Please, excuse me, please wrap up in the next 2 minutes.
Last slide is our capital requests. These are the areas that we're looking to work on for FY26. We've covered the studio and townhouse upgrades. The other pieces and the other ones, I also would like to talk about the computer replacements. Those are very important because the majority of the work that they do is on their computers, and the editing, it's incredibly intensive, and we do need to make sure that their equipment is up to date and they're able to do what they need to do. So our total capital request is $105,000, and like I said, our focus for the FY26 is to make sure that we tackle these and we complete these. Next slide. And with that, that's all we had. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. FinCom member questions.
I have just a quick question. On your last slide, you showed the costs associated with the upgrade of equipment. What do you do with your old equipment? Do you sell it?
I'm not sure how we would repurpose that, do you know?
If we determine what its worth is, the monetary would be of it, and if it's under a certain amount, then it would be recycled, and if it's of a higher amount, we would try to sell it.
Recycled?
Through
Drop-off. The drop-off day.
E-waste. Through the,
okay.
yeah.
And if it's not that, what happens?
Then we can sell it. We can try to sell it to our colleagues, other stations.
Thank you.
Colin.
I'm looking at your funding. You have $1.7 million in your PEG fund right now. This past year, you're going to be using up $169,000 of it. That is, your expenses exceed your revenues by that much. You've got 10 years left before that fund is depleted, don't you? That's the question.
Yes, but we will continue to have we're projecting to continue to have the revenue from the Comcast.
Doesn't matter. You've got the revenues at 358, but you've got the expenses at 530. You're using up 170,000 of it every year. You've got 1.7 in your balance. You've got 10 years left, unless you make some other changes or either you get some more revenues. Mm-hmm. Do you have plans, a 10-year plan to try and change that trajectory, or in 10 years should we plan on you not having any revenue fund?
No, so I don't think that the latter is what we would plan for. I think, while right now I'm not prepared to go into the details of what that would look like, but we would be looking, if that was if that would be the projection of where we were going, we would obviously have to look at other avenues to be able to fund. Now, obviously, the current funding position allocates for a certain amount of personnel. I mean, there's many things that we can look at for cost reductions as we would in any budget.
Okay, the other question I have is follow-up on the Comcast contract with the town. What's the status on that?
Yep, so absolutely. So I think we can finally say that we are in the final stages of negotiations of that. We have one very minor yet required stage that needs, approval that needs to happen. Once that comes back from Comcast, we're prepared to schedule a public hearing and be able to present that. So I think we are in the final phases of that.
Okay, thank you.
Other FinCom questions? Anyone? Okay. Open it up to members of the public. Anybody here in the room have questions or comments on this article?
Carmen Reese, 52 Devon Street, Town Moderator, but just asking a question for myself. Just curious about Carlisle. Do they have a license agreement with Comcast? And if so, is there PEG access fees associated with that? And if so, where are they going?
I'll have to defer to Jason on that piece.
Happy to answer. Yes, Carlisle does have a franchise agreement with Comcast. And as Amalia presented in the budget, Carlisle is sending money to Concord. There's a monthly amount that they pay for their citizens to have access to the studio, and then they also pay for any hours of work that are done by MMN staff. And to your question about the 10 years looking out, the new contract will hopefully contain more revenue, which would push that to 20 or more if it ever happens.
Okay. Any other questions or comments here in the room? How about online, Article 54? Okay. Moving on to Article 55, BD Swim and Fitness Center Enterprise Fund expenditures.
Good evening. My name's Lee Jackson. I'm the Recreation Director here in town. It's a pleasure. Thank you for having us tonight. I'm going to take the first few slides, and then I'll pass it to Jessica. So Article 55 is to determine whether the town will vote to appropriate $2,689,069 in community pool enterprise receipts, $290,000 from interest income. So that's $2,979.60. Wait, did I say that right? 2 million. It's late. $2,979.69 for the Community Pool Enterprise Fund for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2026, for the operation of the community pool. And this is in accordance with Mass General Law 4453F and a half, to be expended under the direction of the town manager. Next slide. We want to present to you this evening our 2025 budget accomplishments. At the BD Center, we showed substantial staff support of the 250th celebration, and we were honored to be a part of it. We are installing now a UV system in the lap pool to reduce unplanned pool closures and excessive water consumption, which we're very proud of as well. We onboarded a planned full-time staff member who's the aquatic supervisor. We've created and implemented a preventative maintenance plan for our fitness equipment. And we've moved to USA Swimming, which offers more structure and professional opportunities for our Otters swim team. We've had 0 unplanned pool closures since September of 2023, and we're happy about that. Next slide. So our 2026 budget goals, we're going to reduce water and sewer costs by 15% from this year. It's a goal. We're going to increase the number of Learn to Swim classes by 10% to this year. We really should be the leader in Learn to Swim in the region, so we're going to get there. We're going to replace and upgrade 3 pieces of fitness equipment. We're going to offer 2 open houses, and we are a new partner, or we want to collaborate with Emerson Hospital to host 3 wellness events in 2026. So that's our budget goals, and I will pass to Jessica to finish the presentation.
Thank you. Jessica Porter, Assistant Town Manager. So you have before you the slide illustrating the fiscal 2025 net income. You'll see that we've listed out the operating revenues less our operating expenses, and then factoring in the additional non-operating revenues from investment income, including funds from the Sawyer Trust. So overall, that does actually show that we are in a small deficit of $11,682 projected for fiscal 25. That said, we do expect to make up some of that, and then if not, we do have some funds sitting in our retained earnings that can be moved into there to put us in the positive. So we're not concerned at all by the 11,000 figure. Next slide. Oh, thank you. You're so fast, Zach. Here you'll see the various budget sources. You'll see that fees and rentals are bringing in $2.689 million, and we also have the interest income, which was mentioned in the earlier slide of the $290,000. We then outline the various expenses of personnel, the purchase services, supplies, materials, other expenses, and then our capital outlay of that $243,000. So that is the projection and the plan for fiscal 2026. Next slide. So for operating revenue sources, we get our revenues from the monthly recurring fees, swim program fees, miscellaneous revenue, personal training, which is offered, our annual memberships, rentals. We have folks that rent the various pool facilities for parties, swim teams, etc. Our group exercise classes, and then our initiation fees. So it's we're estimating about $2.689 million in revenue coming in for fiscal 26. In terms of the various budget categories, again, we sell memberships to both the Beatty Center as well as the Emerson Pool. Our group fitness classes and personal training brings in revenue. Our swim programs between teams, lessons, adaptive aquatics, and other aquatics fitness classes, as well as the facility rentals. Those are our main categories. The next slide just reflects the memberships sold from fiscal 24. Red is non-residents and the blue is resident passes. And you'll see we have the different categories there that are offered in terms of various memberships. And then the next slide actually shows the breakdown from the full year fiscal 24 of where the age categories and percentages of our membership comes from, all fairly straightforward there. You'll see we do have a big band, particularly in the middle category, ages 41 to 81. Then the last slide is just our capital fund projects we hope to complete in fiscal 26. Within the primary facility, we've got roof repair, which is $711,000. We also have an estimate of $500,000 for some structural wall repair. That's the back wall of the main pool area, needs some work and some shoring up. For the pool facility itself, $133,000. That's the typical purchases for filters, monitors, pumps, and other equipment to keep the pools operational and clean, which is also very important. And then last is the $80,000 in the BD fitness equipment, strengths machines, stationary bikes, and other miscellaneous equipment for the fitness portion of the facility. So that is our plan, and we are here as well with Jenny Sicardo, our general manager of BD, if there are any questions from the Finance Committee or the public.
Thank you. Finance Committee member questions, starting on this end. Anyone? Lindsay.
Sure. So it's a little concerning to see the operating losses increase again this year. It would be helpful to get some information about monthly membership trends year over year, trends there, and then like the rate trends as well, what you're charging for the monthly membership. I'm also interested in how your operating capital expenditures compare to recent years, and if that's like, are we underspending now because we're in a deficit? Just a little bit more on trend detail to get a better understanding of what's going on with the underlying business fundamentals would be helpful.
Okay. So it's good
If you have
feedback.
any, I don't know if you have any of that information handy now.
Do you have any of that? Share what we have.
Jenny Sicardo, General Manager of the BD Swim Fitness Center. I can definitely add these details into a slide, which I think is very helpful for the trends. I would say the building's about 20 years old now, and coming into the facility and being there for about a year, it needs some attention. There's a lot of things that have not been taken care of, and we're at a place now where we need to reinvest in the facility to be able to continue to generate revenue to move forward. And so some of the bigger items, the roof restoration, will hold us over for about 15 years. The structural wall repair was a little bit more of a surprise, but something we need to deal with. And then just kind of maintaining everything and putting a preventative maintenance plan in place so that we can continue to grow and move the facility forward. But I've got your notes here, and we'll definitely make some additions to our slides moving forward.
Yeah, just to emphasize on that, you know, in 2022, you were $300,000 operating income, and now you're about $200,000 in the negative in operating income. So I guess my question is, what is ad investment income? You know, you have about $140,000, and that was only...
So that's the interest earned off of our retained
Retained or
earnings.
the entire
Yes.
fund.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Peggy?
This is just a brief comment on the membership statistics. I was most impressed to see that 2.3 of your membership is in the age 91 to 110 category.
Yeah.
Keep those members.
Yes, definitely. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Okay. Members of the public, any questions or comments? Yes.
Hi, Wendy Ravelli, member of the Select Board. Maybe speaking for myself. Did you, in the presentation, did it speak to any rate increases for FY26?
No, we are not intending to increase any membership rates. We did have an increase for this current year. I want to say it was $6 per membership, per category of membership. So we're not anticipating to have any membership fee increases this coming year.
Okay. Anyone else in the room? Questions or comments? Seeing none, how about online? None? Okay. That's Article 55. Thank you.
Thank you. We do have information as well that we're happy to present on the recreation revolving account. I don't know if there's a desire to hear that this evening. It's a few slides. We would love to share it, but I want to be cognizant of time as well.
Why don't we, that's not directly related to this article?
No, it's not anything that gets voted at town
Okay.
meeting, but
If
historically.
you could share it share the slides. The slides are already in our packet.
The slides are in your packet,
Okay.
yes. I just didn't know for the benefit of the public or others.
We'll review those and reach out with any questions. But
Okay,
we do have to get
sounds
through the
good.
rest of the articles. Thank
All
you.
right, thank you.
Article 56, appropriate and transfer balance of parking meter fund.
All right, this article is to really start the elimination of the parking meter fund. As you know, the select board ordered the parking meters to be removed from downtown and West Concord. So with that, we're looking for $60,000 for the cost associated with removing those meters. And the remaining, you can go to the next slide, Zach. And the remaining funds would just go to the general fund. So I can go through these slides if you want, but that's the gist of this one. Any questions?
FinCom questions, starting on this end.
So where did you say it was being released? Where did you say it was being cash or is it?
Yeah, it'll go free cash. Yeah, so that was the beginning balance and then outstanding expenses, and that'll close to the general fund, free cash.
Other questions? Anyone? Okay. Public input, starting here in the room.
Carmen Reese, 52 Devon Street. Just one question, and that is how much money is in the fund? I understand that 60,000 is going to be used for the removals, but I didn't see what the total amount in the fund was.
Can you get the next slide, Zach? So the opening balance is right here.
There it is. Okay, thank you.
Sorry, I just breezed through it quick.
Anyone else in the room?
So where does that 250 go?
Free cash. Go to flow to free cash.
The 60. Where's the 250? The 249?
249 will be the ending balance, it'll flow to free cash.
Okay.
So is there a plan to draw that down eventually, the 249?
No, we're gonna close the fund, it'll go into free cash, we'll probably talk about repurposing, hopefully free cash is at a nice high level that we can do a little bit more into stabilization funds, so.
Okay, thank you.
He's using 60 to pull the meters.
So this is the 56 is to
He's
remove
using
the 60 to
He's
remove
using
the
57 to pull the meters.
Okay,
250.
so the article is to remove the parking meters and then the rest goes into free cash.
Free cash.
Okay, I think that's what.
I was thinking the other way around.
Oh, yeah, no, yeah. No.
They've done a really good job when they've taken them out and looking at the sidewalks and everything. It looks really nice.
I'll pass that on to Public Works.
Anyone else? Okay, public input or questions here in the room? Seeing no one else, how about online? Okay, that's Article 56. Article 57, unpaid bills.
Zach's gonna call that one up. All right, next slide, Zach. And this is just the motion, and the total dollar amount that we have for unpaid bills is $4,942.62. Next slide. Mass General Law, Chapter 44, Section 64 says if we don't have an appropriation to pay a prior year bill, which we don't because the fiscal year is closed, then we need town meeting approval to request an appropriation. Next slide. Here are the invoices that were determined to be from fiscal year 24. Just in case somebody says, hey, Anthony, January 31st, 2025 is part of fiscal year 25. The services were rendered last year, so unfortunately, it's a prior year bill. So goods and services have to be received by June 30th of 24. With that, anybody that has an unpaid bill will be using their FY25 appropriation, and we won't be looking to take that out of free cash or anywhere else. That's the article.
Okay, FinCom questions? Anyone? We good? Public input. Does anybody here in the room have any questions or comments on Article 57? Seeing no one, anyone online? No. Okay. Last up is Article 58, debt rescission.
All right, so this is to determine if town will vote to rescind any unused borrowing authorizations. Next slide. We expect no motion for this. So next year we could, depending on the outcome of this year. And certainly it is something I want to look at, all of our borrowings. It's just something that I haven't been able to take a look at. So hopefully next year we do some cleanup there.
Okay, thank you. Any quick questions from FinCom? It is on the agenda, so I'll ask any input here in the room, any questions or comments on this article? How about online? Okay. Those are all of the articles on the agenda for the public hearing tonight. At this point, I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Do we have a second? Second. We do not need a roll call because all members are present in the room. So all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? The motion carries. The public hearing is closed. So we've reverted to our regular meeting. I'll propose we take a quick break. It's 9:35. Why don't we sit back down at 9:40? 5-minute break? Is that good? Okay, we'll take a 5-minute break. We'll reconvene at 9:40. So again, we've now reverted to our regular meeting. Let me put the agenda on the screen. We're on agenda item number 5, which is discuss and potentially vote on the following articles, and it's all of the articles we just heard in the public hearing. Yep. I'd like to propose that we group the articles, that we take a consent agenda style approach to voting. So we could vote on all of them together in one motion. But what I'd ask, does anybody want to pull any out for consideration individually or separately?
I'd like to pull out 34, the stormwater.
And 33?
33 and 34.
And Eric, I have a general rant.
Okay.
At some appropriate moment, just let me know, but it applies to all of the enterprise funds.
Okay.
But not necessarily to pull it out as far as just piece. Yeah.
Okay, I think we could I don't know the nature of your rant, but I suppose we could cover it.
There's consent discussion.
Right, I was going to say, we can cover it during the discussion of this
Great.
omnibus motion.
Carlin, your rant is limited to 5 minutes.
Oh, I have it printed out. Okay.
I'd like to hear it right now.
Well, if I may.
Hang on. Let's just align on how we're going to approach this.
Okay.
So we've pulled out 33 and 34. So we would make a motion on Articles 48 through 57.
58, because there's no action.
Right, 58 we don't have to worry about. Right.
So I move affirmative action on Articles 48 through 57.
I second.
Peggy and Paul.
Okay. And just to be crystal clear, that's in numerical order, all inclusive, Articles 48 through 57 as shown on the agenda. We're not skipping any in that range. Okay. Discussion.
I want to hear Carlin's rant.
Well, we can go ahead and, my rant will not affect the vote.
But it's the time to discuss.
Okay, fine. All right, I see once again we don't have an enterprise book. This is the second year in a row that we don't have an enterprise book. I've been watching and reading enterprise books from cover to cover since I started in 2017. And that has the detailed analysis and the line-by-line item of all the funds, all the expenditures, all the revenues. But all we're getting is a slide deck and an oral presentation, and we're basing our recommendations on just that. That's unacceptable. I'm very disappointed.
If I may, Mr. Chair?
I'm not done yet. In reading the enterprise book, I found questions and issues to ask at every enterprise hearing. While it's reassuring that we can rely on various commissions to review the proposed rates, revenues, and expenditures, we are abrogating our finance duties if we cannot do the same. Otherwise, why should the FinCom even give recommendations on the enterprise funds? What value do these recommendations have? Now, I look forward to seeing the fiscal year 27 enterprise fund book at least a week before the public hearing next year. as has been done in the past, so we can do our job, because we're not able to do our job. Thank you for the rant.
Can I just address that? So the enterprise budgets are up on ClearGov now. We got them up today, so they're up there. We would have loved to get them up earlier, but we're doing the best with what we have.
You may respond, Colin, if you wish.
Thank you, Anthony. I appreciate that. However, putting them up today is not giving us nearly adequate time to review the items. So next year, please have them put up electronic at least 1 week before the public hearing. Because otherwise, I am voting no on every enterprise fund that comes before this committee meeting next year. I can promise you that.
Any other discussion on our omnibus motion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? The motion carries unanimously. Okay, going back to those articles we pulled out. Article 33, MCI Concord Planning. Discussion.
So here, I felt that there was insufficient explanation of how the funds were going to be used.
Of what?
On how the funds, how the $250,000 is going to be used. I saw that they listed the categories, but I think Don brought up a question about the wastewater treatment. Isn't that already being looked at by in Alan's request and Alan's budget? So yeah, it wasn't sufficient enough for me to justify taking anything out of free cash, which I feel like it's a high bar to be able to move things out of free cash when we know we need to set up stabilization funds.
Lois.
I share your concerns. I am very conflicted over this article. On the one hand, I think MCI Concord is one of the largest opportunities town's been given in the more than 30 years I've lived here to really make some decisions that could affect our future. And I want to see us positioned in the best possible way to explore those possibilities and to acquire the tools and the information to make the best recommendations and ultimate decisions. But I do share your concern that I didn't see specificity about how the money was going to be spent. There is going to be money spent by the state on this. I don't know how much of it is duplicative, how much of it is focused on doing what we're the most responsible for, which I understand is the zoning piece of it. It just doesn't feel cooked. But I'm also concerned about the timing. If we vote it down, will we? I heard what Mark said about missing an opportunity if we vote it down. So I am legitimately conflicted about this, and I really want to hear what other people have to say.
Don.
So I am very conflicted as well, but I've come to see it through a little bit different lens now. And I think it's unfortunate that there are specifics mentioned in there, because I don't think they know what they might need money for. And if they don't have an appropriation, they won't have any ability to do anything. So while I'd hate to see the money go for the things that were listed, for the reasons I raised earlier, I'd also hate to see this effort be stymied by lack of access to a budget. So I think from my perspective, I'm going to trust in the good judgment of the select board, who I believe has, although it didn't say this, but I believe that they have the oversight of the spending, and then if that's the case, then I'll vote yes.
Other points? Paul.
So I look at this as almost like an option and ROI. like, they don't know what the funding world is going to be like. So they want to create an option so that they can invest, if necessary, to keep momentum so we can get that return on that investment. The return of that investment exceeds the cost, even though it would be great if they had a full plan of exactly what they want to use that money for. But I don't think they want to use that money. They just need it in case.
I concur. I think what was explained was the timing of our town meeting versus when they might get an appropriation from the state. And so, as Dawn said, I mean, if this doesn't get voted on, then they could potentially be without any funds to operate. So I'm going to vote for it.
Other points? Anyone else?
I move affirmative action.
We have a motion to vote.
I move affirmative action on Article 33.
Second.
Discussion of the motion. Hearing none.
I have one question. As we're taking these votes, as we're taking these votes, if there is a no vote, how do you want it recorded? Just as a no, or do you want the person who votes no recorded?
In the minutes?
In the minutes.
I am not sure. That's a good question.
We haven't done that in previous.
Your
Oh, no,
previous
I'm
minutes
not suggesting we
didn't
should,
have-
but hypothetically, you say, everyone in favor, you say aye. Everyone opposed, nay. How do I record how many nays were there?
In the,
You're saying because we're not doing.
because we're not doing roll calls, yeah. In the absence of a roll call, I don't believe it's necessary to list the names.
How about listing the number of people?
We have to
That-
listen to.
Okay, so
Yeah,
if
oh,
they're
yeah.
like that, okay, thank you.
Let's raise our hands on this one.
Okay. Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion on Article 33? Opposed?
Keep your hands up.
No, hold on, he just said opposed. What are we at?
Wait,
Start over.
This is favor.
Hang on. All those in favor? Opposed? One. Okay.
I didn't see the one.
The one is.
Okay, thanks. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, the last article is Article 34, Stormwater Enterprise Fund Expenditures. Discussion. Dawn.
This year, we are showing in the budget payment in lieu of taxes from the nonprofits in town, going from $25,000 up to, I think it's $475,000. So we're hitting the nonprofits in town for a big bundle of money. And during this presentation, I learned that half of the Stormwater Fund, or roughly $500,000, will be coming from that same pool. So my question is, have we thought through as a town, have we thought through how we are approaching the nonprofit community in town? And are we really here asking too much at once?
Greg.
So can I ask a question on this article? We're not really voting to put the fee in place. The fee is going to be in place. It's to expend the funds, correct?
So
we're
you're
setting the budget, so we can't argue about fees, taking fees in.
Right.
That's not the article. We're setting the budget for them to expend that. So I hear your concern,
Okay.
but we shouldn't argue that portion as part of this article.
So that's going to happen no matter what. Well, my question is still good for the town. Have we thought through it, how to message this? Okay, fair enough. So Greg, you're saying are we going to authorize expenditure of $1 million?
Are we going to authorize them to expend the funds that are collected?
Thanks.
That's what this article is for.
And what is it, and a no vote means the money just comes out of the general fund?
So as I asked, that
Okay.
a no vote means that it's status quo. If something fails, they have to pay for it on an emergency basis. They don't do the upkeep.
Got it.
Yes.
Can I also make a clarification? Don, I think the presentation said about half the money came from the commercial sector, which is non-residential, so not single-family residential. So half of it is now coming from a combination of nonprofits and for-profit commercial development, such as Hartwell Avenue, such as Baker Avenue, such as, other parts of town. So
Yeah.
I think overall, the nonprofit will probably be, less than 25% when you think of all of Baker Avenue and some of the other developments. So I understand your point. I just want to make that clarification.
And if I can just add to that, we didn't suddenly get 400,000 grand in from the nonprofits in town. The pilot program is just beginning. And it's going to be an effort, hopefully, that we'll be engaged in over the next several months. But most of that money's coming from an enterprise fund, isn't it? Or is it from the light plant?
Yeah, exactly.
Almost
It's
all.
450, and the other 25,000 is from the Housing Authority.
Right. So the pilot program has not started yet. There's a policy in place, but getting a pilot program to ramp up takes a while. We're going to try and expedite it. But when I was on that little subcommittee with Anthony and Mary to develop the policy that was then submitted to and approved by the select board, and there are individual negotiations. It takes time. I think you're conflating things that don't go together.
Okay, that's good to know, Lois. So where did you say the 450 is coming from the light plant?
Yeah.
Oh.
That's a different pilot. It's a payment in lieu of taxes, but it's
Eric,
not
can we-
part of.
It's late. Can we time this? Isn't.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay.
Good point.
Other points or questions? Okay. I have a clarifying question. I think I'm confused, and frankly, I don't think the presentation helped. The fee schedule is out of the scope of the article, but the presentation had at least a couple of slides on the fees. What is the consequence if this article fails at town meeting in terms of the fees?
I might be able to help with that. Remember, they're going to have the rate hearing on May 14, and that's when the Public Works Commission decides what the rates will be. So at that time, the Public Works Commission will go through their decision-making process and approve or disapprove or modify whatever the rates are. Odds are they're going to approve this rate structure as is.
Greg, I don't want to drag this out. I really don't.
I can't. Sorry.
I don't want to drag this out. I really don't. But
I just can't hear you.
we're not litigating the underlying decision to form the stormwater fund.
No.
Done, finished, decided last year. So now all we are doing, like we do with all of the other enterprise funds, hopefully next year with more upfront information available to us, we're approving a budget.
Yeah.
That's all we have the authority to do right now. That's what the article asks us to do. I do not know what happens if the stormwater enterprise fund, which exists, doesn't get an approved budget. I don't understand how that happens. But the question before us is, do we want to approve the budget or not?
So they answered that when I asked them, right? None of the work that they have proposed there gets done.
Well, then maybe they can also, I don't know if they can implement the fees if they're not doing anything about stormwater. Sven, do you want to?
So Sven Weaver, Chair of Public Works Commission. So what is happening is we are approving the fee structure subject to that we can draw against the fees when we collect it. If town meeting rejects this, the fees will not be implemented. So we will have the same situation like we had this fiscal year, where we have stormwater enterprise fund bylaw structure, which is completely unfunded.
No revenue.
And then we fall back to emergency repairs. So
Okay.
that is, and we did that because we got public feedback that people want to know what the financial impact for them is on a fee structure before they authorize that there is a budget. So it's a chicken and egg problem we try to solve, and therefore there is this element of fee in the presentation that people understand, okay, if I have a small residential entity, it's $40. If I'm, let's say, a Baker Avenue commercial guy, it's $23,000. Yeah, so that's why this is there.
Yeah.
So I would like to make a motion. Have we discussed this enough?
No.
We have?
I haven't
John,
been
can speak
invited to
out?
speak, but if I might offer,
Please.
I think that talking about the fee structure in the context of this article is exactly analogous to talking about the tax impact of borrowing. That's exactly what we're doing. We're not, and the article is not talking about the tax rate, and nobody gets to vote the tax rate. You get to vote the budgets, which then have an impact on tax rates. So in this case, we vote the budget for stormwater, and it has an impact through fees.
Thank you, and that's directly where I wanted to go next, which is to say that just for everybody to be aware that the increase in the town's budget this year is less than these fees. So this function has been a small piece of the town's operations. The town's operating budget this year is rising by less than $1 million, and that's 2.85% increase per our guidelines. So we're doubling that through this action. Thanks.
Paul.
But I do want to say that we're gaining the fees from like sources that normally wouldn't be collected for our normal general fund, as well as giving resources that can be proactive instead of reactive, meaning the cost is less. So those two things benefit like everybody. And it would have been great if those two things were the main point of the presentation.
Right.
So if you could bring that back, that would be a good thing.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good idea.
I'll make a motion to approve Article 34, Stormwater Enterprise Fund expenditures.
I second.
Affirmative action.
Okay, the motion is to recommend affirmative action of Article 34. We have a second discussion of the motion.
I did.
I myself am concerned, given the economic reality. The headline yesterday was the economy is officially contracting, which everybody sees coming. Department leadership acknowledged they have concerns about affordability for residents and businesses in town. I think this is exactly the wrong time to be going down the road of a new fee on top of the sky-high taxes we already pay in town. I also found the presentation confusing, given the focus is not supposed to be the fees, but the presentation spent a not insignificant amount of time on the fees. So I do not support affirmative action of this article.
I got one question. So when Fred, maybe you may answer this one too. In the emergency repair case, where does that money come from? Does that come from funds within that, or does that come back to sort of town?
Well, to be most of it comes from the roads program. So, because if you have the emergency, the biggest thing that is destroyed is the road. So if you have suddenly half of the roads gone, you take it from the road program.
So assuming that the other article with the roads being funded.
Yeah, but that's how we did it the last 20 years. Yeah, we only took it from the road program, and then we complain the roads are not repaired, we have not enough money for the roads. The whole infrastructure is a piece of puzzle, and one piece of the infrastructure belongs to the other, and somehow they are all connected somehow to the roads because the water is under the roads, the sewer is under the roads, the gas is under the roads, the stormwater is under the roads itself. So it's, but in the end, if we only react to it, so for example, the Baker Avenue repair, which now is $1 million. Yeah, if we would have spent $50,000 before to maintain that, we would not have spent $1 million.
So this could, if this doesn't pass, this could eventually come out of the like 50 million.
Yeah, but then
that we're trying to fix the roads with.
Yeah.
Yes.
yes,
Thank you.
yeah, it's a choice town can do. The money comes from somewhere.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Just quickly to the question that Greg just asked. The Baker Avenue culvert repair actually was $1 million of our COVID relief funds. It came from ARPA. And so we just happened to be lucky that we had,
Still had, yeah, still had the funds.
that we had that. If something else occurs, those monies are gone, and that's this whole budget. It occurs to me that we don't set aside depreciation funds for roads, for stormwater infrastructure. The setting up of these utility funds allows us to do that. So we see that the light plant has depreciation, BD Center has depreciation, that stabilizes that. The reason that we're in such a hole on roads and stormwater is because we don't do that when the funding for it comes out of the general fund. Thanks.
So we have a motion pending.
We have a motion, it's been seconded, we're in discussion now. Any further discussion or points on this article? Okay, I think we're ready. All those in favor of this motion? Opposed? The motion carries. Okay. Those are all of the articles on the agenda for tonight. Let me pull up our agenda.
I move to adjourn.
Hang on, we do have some.
No.
Hang on. We took care of correspondence, we took care of minutes. Upcoming meetings. I am going to cover that. So our next meeting, our last meeting before town meeting is Thursday, May 22nd. We'll use that meeting to get organized for town meeting. That's traditionally where we elect offices for next year. And we'll take care of other miscellaneous housekeeping on that date.
When is this?
What about,
Thursday, May 22nd.
what about our votes on Articles 18 and 19, the stabilization funds? When do we do that? At town meeting?
We defer
So
those
we-
to town meetings.
So we should schedule a town meeting, pre-meeting meeting of some sort.
Right,
and
we always
signal
do that. I'll take care of that. We will post a meeting immediately preceding town meeting to take care of that. But in the more immediate term, our next regular meeting will be, like I said, Thursday, May 22nd at 6:30. Now, one other big milestone between now and then is the FinCom report. The report is due Monday. We have an almost complete draft, thanks to Dawn and Lindsay and Lois and Colin and several other folks. Article narrative owners, please get your draft narratives to me and Dawn by noon tomorrow at the absolute latest. So folks who owned articles that we voted on tonight, you've got a quick turnaround, but I ask you to prioritize those just so we can get this wrapped up.
And there are still some article discussions outstanding from prior votes. So anyone who hasn't gotten it in, the deadline is gone. It's got to be tomorrow.
Can you send around the ownership of the
I
articles?
will recirculate the list of owners in my recap email for this meeting. We will send out the draft report tomorrow to everybody, and we invite your review and your comments by Sunday at 5 o'clock, because we got to get it turned around. We do have several designated reviewers, Peggy and Dee. Anybody and everybody else is welcome to take a look and offer your feedback. Just be cognizant of the fact we've got to turn it around really quick, so I wouldn't advise like totally rewriting it.
Yeah, no suggestions to take more than a minute.
You can certainly make suggestions. We just may not have time to incorporate them. But we got to have it done by Monday.
Do we send our edits to you, Eric?
Don owns the document.
Send
We
them
send
to
them
me.
to Don.
Yeah,
Don's
I'm-
controlling the
we're
document.
Doing it real time.
Okay.
By noon tomorrow.
By noon, send your narratives to me and Dawn tomorrow for the remaining narratives.
It's not in our,
Okay. All right. With that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
second.
We have Peggy made the motion. We have a second. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you.